magicians. There we go, Mookie. Um, and I will call myself as a co-host, or at least the host of most of them, the voice of the Grey Lodge, maybe. Um, so we host these spaces. We talk about Tantra, Kabbalah. We've done a range of them. I did a speculative series called Aeon of the Daughter. It was kind of a big deal for me personally, but these spaces are more broad, and we talk about a little of obviously metaphysics, metafiction, and a little bit of real world, or as Solar would call it, meta politics. How magic influences, maybe we'll just say the real world, if there is such a thing, more broadly, and the ways that we can also interact with it. So we will, as is our tradition, we are going to do a little Kabbalah and a little Dion Fortune's mystical Kabbalah, and on Keter, because that is the last Sephra that we actually, I don't know if we did Dath, but I think we discuss it every single space. I don't think there's been a single time where it hasn't come up in some capacity, and like what that is, and it's it's the hidden sphere for a reason, because it requires we are Dath in some ways of thinking. It's like that spark that we don't recognize very often. Sometimes we can hit it and it's like pristine, but it requires our kind of awareness. So we will not discuss Dath in depth, but it is an important discussion when it comes to Kether. So we're going to do that. We are going to read. So for all the book club bros, we are going to read. Well, I'm going to read. Well, if anyone else wants to, from Donald Michael Craig's Modern Magic. Shout out Monty, because we obviously did an episode where I was thinking about that book, or this book, and brought it up, and you probably were like, "What is Jin thinking?" But I promise, I had a basis. I I had a foundation of where I was coming from, not just out in the ether, I guess. So let's do room shoutouts. So we have Matt Mora as our co-host, or as my co-host. Well, our co-host, because it's all of us, and Solar. So Solar is, I would say, my left-hand man, right-hand man. I don't know, either one, either or. We go, we're non-dual, right? So he does everything, and he, I don't know, he co-manages my wildness, at least. And so then we have Avi, who is one of our Dakinis, a very treasured member from the day one, came to every space, showed up, true homie. Monty, of course, true homie. Come on, a year of doing a series on anime and occultism, and he probably had no idea who I was at the very beginning, or maybe maybe he regrets it. I don't know, but I think it was incredibly fun, and I appreciate doing that with him, and it's great to see that kind of idea has gained more traction. I see a lot more people talking about it. So maybe just a little too cutting edge, Monty. So we have Joshua the Branch, who I'm so glad joined the lodge. Really, another true homie. I guess all of you are. Um, and so Joshua did an episode recently on my show that aired at 39, but he's coming back, and we are doing a series on Resident Evil. So I think this is perfectly in keeping with like what Threshold Saints has become. It's about speculative ontology. It's about metafiction, and there's no better way to sort of explore that than through a property that transcends all the multiple mediums. Video games, there's a manga, there's obviously films, there's anime, there's the CGI films. This is there's books, there's a whole series. So this really is, I don't know, you could say it's like alternate reality. And do we decode it? Do we decipher it? So anyways, I'm really looking forward to that. I think it'll be a great, fun series. And obviously, Joshua as my co-host will be also great. Joseph Reed, appreciate you. I've seen you on the timeline. I see your interaction. Much obliged. I don't know that much about you personally, but from what I glean, I'm a fan. So welcome and thank you. And thank you for your support and supporting the not just Grey Lodge, but also Threshold Saints, because it doesn't happen if you don't have any listeners. Of course, we have my Singaporean bro, Ram. We love Ram. I love Ram. Like a little brother. I find him always hilarious. Like him and Matt, to me, I know they're different. I know they're very different. Okay, totally got it. But similar in many ways because both my foil, but also people I could ask advice from, regardless of their how junior they are. And to me, even though I still am the best at Kabbalah and Tantra in the group, but I agree that all of them are, everyone else is skilled and talented. And I mean, you couldn't really hang if you weren't all high IQ. That's the truth. Then, of course, we have our Crow Dakini Mookie, who has been in the group for quite a while, has stuck with us, has shared incredible pictures, has talked about incredible things, and I'm starting to get to know, and I really appreciate it. I think it's so great. I think it's so cool. I don't think that my show would have kept going if it wasn't for the spaces. I think I used the spaces when I felt in a rut or like in a klipa, as I like to say. And so Mookie joined right at that time, right at that axial, pivotal moment where it really meant something to me. Not that it doesn't mean something to you for all of you, but of course, it was right at a moment where I always remember because I was like, should I even keep going? Should I even do the spaces? And I enjoy doing the spaces. Last week I walked away, and then I'll shut up and we can actually discuss. I'm sure Matt's like, shut up, Jen. But I just want to say I appreciate you guys and anyone listening and Grey Lodge. And it's amazing. I think it's so cool. As you know, if you follow the chat, I know we sometimes, although it was quiet today, but sometimes we, it's long threads, and I do my stream of consciousness, kind of like I don't know, 5-word lines, so it's multiple lines, and so what was I going to say? Okay, so I interviewed, I won't say his name, but a very high-ranking member of the Temple of Set. The episode's not out yet. I know when it's dropping. I believe it's April 6th or April 9th. I can't remember. But it's coming. It's coming. I've got a lot on my plate. Anyways, it was extremely clarifying. There you go, Mario, Symbolic Studies. Shout out Mario because he had a great episode on my show, episode 40, True North, Hyperborean Symbolism. Hapaborean, as I often call it, right? Because we're not so, Hyperborean speaks more to a Siberian or a Russian or maybe even European sort of element, whereas like Hapaborean brings it right back to America. So I just think that there is something, even though I talk a lot of shit and I make up a lot of phrases and words perhaps sometimes, they actually do have, there is a subtle meaning. There is a subtle meaning. So maybe you could say I'm growing in my skill as a magician because I'm able to use strange words that I've coined, and some of them have interestingly entered the zeitgeist, like Hapaborean, at least on Twitter. So, although shout out Monty, because he did actually describe, I think he was the first one to describe it as an esoteric Hapaborean podcast. So, the words don't spread without the homies. That's the, it's true for magic and it's true for words. So, of course, there's that. Where even was I going with this? Okay, so I interviewed the guy, Temple of Set. Very interesting. Very interesting. Honestly, shockingly interesting. I was kind of like, yeah, it's going to be really interesting. As Solar knows, I give him a hard time, and as Joshua knows, as I also give him a hard time, Odin is not my thing. I'm not a pagan. I don't understand it. I don't understand it Kabbalistically. And as I said, I am relatively good at Kabbalah. So but it doesn't mean that it's not real in a way. So, what it helped clarify for me was that they were all thinking these exact same things about metafiction. They were just doing kind of like I'm going to use a pejorative, but it's not a pejorative. Okay. So, it's like very internet speak, it's very Twitter speak. It is kind of like, actually, I won't because I actually really like Don Webb. And so I won't call them ultra and all, but but I mean it in the best way, right? Because it's like you're just saying, yeah, these guys are kind of like boomery in their approach to like meta magic. I think, yeah, solar. Okay, so I can say this. Okay, so yeah, they are kind of boomery in their approach, but they're talking about Lovecraft and for us, especially for like the Zoomers, for like Rom and Matt particularly, probably Avi as well, and all the young, the young guns in our group. It probably seems like we're talking about Ultron things. Like when I'm talking about like chaos magic and tantra and drawing from the text and I know that Matt knows what I'm talking about, but I also think that they probably find it like a little old fashioned. But that's exactly how I think we also think, like those of us that are more millennial, we also think of those kind of guys. And so we were like, wow, their approach is so boomer, so old fashioned, but it's methodical and it has a validity in its own way. Do I agree with their conclusions? No. But for whatever criticisms you want to make of the order of trapezoids, of the order of temple set, whatever, you cannot say that they were not methodical and good and strong Kabbalists. Although they wouldn't necessarily, as we discussed in the group chat, they wouldn't necessarily. Some of them wouldn't, at least. Those who are more interested in like the Germanic and the Stephen Flowers crowd, they wouldn't necessarily admit that it's Kabbalah, but to me, it seems very obvious that a lot of what they're talking about is Kabbalah. Just like straight up Jewish Kabbalah, like no. Yes, Matt, please go ahead.
So trust me, I've been trying to get rid of my cognitive dissonance of finding that everything is Kabbalah, but it's impossible, bro. It's impossible. Like yesterday, I'm gonna share this because it was very funny. So yesterday, I was having this Kabbalah class, and we were talking about this, like everything. Again, it's just different namings and so on, so on. And I had studied last week that about the Yoruba. So it's like the African tradition that went to Brazil and got a lot of syncretism there and so on and so on. So if we decompose Yoruba, we have Yod, Hesh, and Beit, right? Then we get another name, Yahava or Yahoveh, whatever the fuck the thing you want to use, right? You have Yud, you have He, and you have Vav. But the thing is, Resh and He are very close to sound, and Vav and Beit are very, again, they interchange a lot of the time. So when my my mentor said this, I was like, no, bro, it's it's everywhere. I cannot unsee it now. And it's crazy. Again, we can call it different things. We can call tempo of whatever. Like, you know, it's just always comes back to this. Just a simple way of calling it, right?
Absolutely. That was perfectly said. And let's talk about Yoruba stuff. Let's talk about it for a minute because we don't. I mean, you guys don't know this, but since I was like when I became fully immersed in esotericism, although probably for my whole life, to be honest. Like, let's be honest, it's been my whole life. But when I really became interested in like the various fruits that are on offer, I, as many cohorts in my sort of generation did, we were all interested in Afrosyncretic traditions because it makes a lot of sense, right? Like it's not modern, excuse me. It's an American kind of magic. What is an American magic, you may ask? Well, an American magic is inherently syncretic, draws from the three primary. I know this is more of a. I'm pulling from Brazil, Matt, so it's not 100% of an American idea, but there is something interesting about it that you're drawing from like the three root races. I know we talked a little bit about this, but all, and it doesn't have to be about race. Like you guys know, I'm not really. I think that's kind of more of a theosophical build over. I don't think that that's really what it means. That's not how what it means to me in tantra. But okay, so I do think there's something interesting though for talking about the concept of like hyperborea or hypoborea and what it means to draw from the peoples that are here already. So I'm not talking about immigration or anything. I'm talking about the peoples that are here for whatever reason, multifaceted, complex, like the root of America. Okay. So if you want to say that's white dudes, okay, white boy summer, let's fucking go. Okay. But we're just taking a broader view, I think we can say that it's more than that. I think that regardless of how we categorize it, I think that there's something interesting in bringing in these three roots of magic. So that's what Matt is even saying. It's syncretic. Yes, the Yoruba stuff's really particularly interesting because why? A lot of people have linked it to the chemesticist. We talked about this in a group chat, like the Egyptology craze. There we have John, our resident astro. So we have, the Egyptology craze. Obviously, the guy from the Temple set, not a fan. Definitely not a fan. And I agree with him in the sense that I'm not really a fan either, but those stories clearly are interesting and have relevance. Now, do they stay with me personally? No. I'm strictly a Tantra Purana, sometimes a Sutra guy. That's what I like. So if you're asking me what my perspective is, that will always be where I draw from. Just because it's living, it's alive, there's hundreds of millions of Buddhists all over Asia. Just because it doesn't always seem like Dharma is fruitful in the world, there is. It's just not maybe around us. So, something to consider. And also, Xi Jinping's wife is a tantrika. So, if you ever need convincing of the Dragon Lady, following the Dragon Lady, maybe that's not a bad idea. I'm just saying. Um, so I digress. So Yoruba. So there's something interesting in this where they have the 7 rays. It's very Amesha Spenta. I know that there's more Orisha than that. I know there's a long list of Orisha. But I think that especially in like Cuba and the kinds that I'm used to or have like read about or studied or been with people who are Poleros or Santeros, I think the idea is there's a 7 main rays that descend from the one. So you can even hear there's something very Zoroastrian, very primordial seed about that, like right away. Now, do I think that they get it wrong in one way of thinking? Because I do not believe, and they are better about this in Brazil, is my understanding. So this might be incorrect, but my understanding is they are better about they worship them in the sopa pots. This is just how I understand. This might be totally incorrect. But they prefer them in the formless sort of like an empty vessel, but the vessels aren't empty. They place things that are important, just like we do in Tantric Buddhism, just like how we would fill statues. So they place it in the sopa pot, but they actually don't have they're not like a statue. It's more of a, you could say it's like emptiness. It's probably their understanding of emptiness in some way because the metaphor is there, right? The klipa, the clay vessel. It's very, it's very if you know what you're looking at, these things are incredibly obvious. So but yes, so Santero, I'm not saying everybody should be a Santero or go off to get your Colares in Santeria and worship Papa Legba. We have already seen a lot of occultists do that. They often get bored of it really fast, and it's just not. It's a religion kind of like I'm not using it as a pejorative, but there is an element of a folk religious framework. I'm not saying it's not deep, but I think in the day to day practices, I don't necessarily think it's relevant necessarily to like the modern Western magician. But yes, I'm going to let Matt go, and I'm sure he disagrees with me. Okay, Matt, please go. Please convince me otherwise.
No, no, no. I was gonna say it's exactly this. Like, if let's say you were born in a country that has nothing to do with those type of symbols, and you wanna start to use them, it's gonna be a hard time because you need to get used to them, right? Like at the end of the day, for example, all the orishas and the odus and so on, they always come back to like astrology and again to fucking Kabbalah and so on, so on, so on. But if you don't know them, as in you don't know their stories because you weren't told their stories your whole life, it's gonna be much harder. So, like, as for example, I like a lot Tantra and so on, but I don't know nothing about the stories or Buddhism and so on. So for me, it's much harder to use those symbols as in comparison to using, I don't know, like Christian symbols or other stuff that I always heard about. It's just easier to make the association, because if again it's all in the mind, then the symbols are the power. So I completely agree with you. Like you can play around. Like I've learned recently to make some numerology with the odus, which are like the the guys above the Orishas. Let's say if you want to put in a hierarchy, it's kind of something like this. But it's not something that I'm going to use in the day to day, just because why would I? I don't have context on that. Doesn't make sense. Just overcomplicating things.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you, Matt. So I totally agree, obviously, and I think that that's why I have a problem. Like, this is just me. So anyone can, you're free to disagree. I think you all know this. I think you've all pushed back in your own ways against, like, not in a mean way, but like you'll stand up for your own ideas, and I encourage you all to do that. I may challenge you on it. I may ask you to explain it to me in a Kabbalistic way if we're talking about a magic, but I'm pretty fair. I think I'm pretty fair with I'll listen to at least ideas. I try and be, and I want to shout out Zach Schumar, my co-host, great dude. Love you, brother. Great to see you. I'm really glad you came. I hope you enjoy it. And so everybody, give Zach a fist bump. Just show him my love. Okay, so the Yoruba stuff. To just circle back to the idea of syncretic American magic, I think this is a really interesting idea. I know Gordon White used to talk a lot about this, like when I used to listen to that show, obviously. Thank you guys for the fist bumps. For Zach, those are for Zach, but yes, thank you guys for doing that. I appreciate that. Thank you, John. So I think that's a really interesting idea. I think that really goes along with like an axial age sort of tendency. I know we talked a little bit about this last week. If you listened or didn't listen, we talked about how I sort of believe what Heidi also believes. This is from Heidi Love of the Unfiltered Rise podcast. She surprised me with her depth of knowledge, to be honest. I wasn't necessarily expecting like her to understand Solomonic magic to like such a proficient degree, but she's definitely like she's intermediate. She clearly understands what they're for. She can guide you through the construction of them. That's quite impressive. And if you think also that like Stephen Skinner only rectified the tables and the seals very recently, like only in the last 20-25 years. So she was able to glean that just from her background in Mormonism. So anyways, my point is I made the case from Heidi, obviously, crediting her, but in my own way, I've drawn other conclusions. So she posits that, yes, Mormonism really is a kind of Solomonic magic. Now, specifically, it's Martinist. It's related, but not necessarily the same thing as Dutch powwow. And then they clearly took on other elements like theosophy, like Golden Dawn ideas, like Astrum Argentum ideas, like I mean, all of those ideas are baked in, right? Like, it's like it's an angel channeling cult, it's a host cult, and I'm not even using that as a pejorative because it does seem like a lot of magicians are very preoccupied with the worship of the hosts. And I'm not talking about modern magicians. I'm talking about historical throughout the ages. This idea of the worship of hosts, particularly Gevuratic and Hasidic, seem to play a large role in sort of the differences, you could say, between orders or between cosmologies or between sort of magical worldviews. Just as Merkaba versus Hecalot, Palace versus Chariot, I know I said them. No, I said them. Yeah, no, I said that. That's right. Uh, so, excuse me. So, I think that there are differences in worldview. And I think that what is interesting about Mormonism is it was able to sort of syncretize certain elements and then they made their own thing. And what I realized when I was speaking with the guy from Temple of Set is that he also copped to doing this. He said they all did this. Aquino is sitting there reading Lovecraft. Like, whatever you think of the guy, that is fucking interesting. That's interesting. The someone is, and yes, he coped and was like Lovecraft wasn't a magician. I mean, I don't know. Mario might disagree. I know Mario likes Lovecraft, but I don't know. I think that Lovecraft maybe was. I don't. I think it's beyond being tapped into something, because I do understand in maybe my, you know, underground Twitter culture way, we'll call it. Like there is like something create when you're doing something creative, like creative writing or podcasting, or like I do everything by hand. I don't use AI for anything. I do all my show notes, so when they have mistakes, you know, the only person who really gives me shit, well, interestingly, is Sachki. But it's because he knows, obviously, he comes from a place of love. I appreciate the correction. But what I'm saying is that that is why they sometimes have mistakes, because I do it all by hand. Yes, I double check it, but, things happen. I'm not the greatest typist. But what I'm trying to say is that I understand in a small way maybe what the creative process looks like. So, in a greater scale, there's something more to what he's talking about. He's fundamentally, you could say, just the artist maybe is the magician. I think we even had a space about this where we at least touched on this idea. So we did. So Matt's saying yes. So we clearly did. So yeah, of course the artist is the magician. That's so obvious, right? Because you're taking something from the alchemical base and you're creating something, you're forging something, you're putting something of yourself, whatever yourself is. Maybe that's also emptiness, maybe that's a word. And you're putting it into the ether. So that's kind of why podcasting is such an interesting medium, if you want to be honest, because in many ways, a podcast is, as Rom so eloquently put it, and as I said last space, it is the way to capture space, contain space, not constrain it, right? Because the words shouldn't constrain space. This is also something that I found out. It was that Anton LaVey used to do those recitations backwards, and he would play with the word order, the syntax, and the grammar. Now, as you all know, I'm a Buddhist. I'm middle pillar. I am not. I don't think you need to do all that. I don't think that the way that you were raised in Christianity harmed you particularly, regardless of your perceptions or experiences in it. I think you should take of the system or the systems, if you so choose, if you so will it, and make of something interesting with them. And I think it's totally possible. So I don't think you need to go backwards. I don't think you need to. That's what all of that is for. I instantly understood, because Tantra is very similar to this, right? Except we do it in a more liturgical, we have a very particular ritual methodological order. We have a particular methodological reason why we do things in the syntax that we do them and why we do them. We already treat it very conceptually. It's very much of your mind. So I understood what he's doing. It makes complete sense. If you believe you were indoctrinated, if that you believe your free will was in some way oppressed, I believe a lot of American Protestants, in particular, American Protestants. I'm not even casting aspersion on Protestantism in general. I actually don't. As I said, the Martinists are very interesting magicians. So you can say what you want about um, Mormons, and but the Martinists and sort of like that order of like people who were doing more Protestant Kabbalah, that to me that's really interesting. Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna piggyback on that. There's something kind of interesting. Not that all American Protestants or Protestants in general are Calvinist and deterministic in their sort of theology, but to the extent that American Protestantism is particularly influenced by Calvinism, I've which it is, I would say most people would agree with that. There's this kind of interesting thing where even people who have removed themselves from like theological Protestantism, they're not practicing Christians, I feel like there's this hangover where people look at their worldview as being kind of like baked in, like, oh, I was raised in a certain way, and so that's just like how I make sense of the world conceptually. So they're sort of secularizing this notion of sort of determinism at the meta level, right? And so I think it's kind of against that backdrop that the sort of liberatory remixing rituals of doing this and that backwards or whatever can be useful for individuals who feel like they need to, shake themselves loose, and sort of like liberate the power of certain like symbolic systems or even just like their own will from this menacing, deterministic kind of system that they can't shake free of otherwise, right? But if you don't have to do that, then you're just kind of LARPing and wasting your time, right?
No, you're 100% correct. And I think you even laid out the reason why those things are even interesting and important to begin with. Because they can be really useful and they can be actually used skillfully. But it's all dependent on your view. It's all dependent on, as you know, I like to say, it's on bodhicitta or loving kindness or hesed. It's all dependent on that. But I believe that there is a way to use those things skillfully. Now, I do take it conceptually. So, those backwards recitations, that makes a lot of sense to me. We do the same visualization. Which way does the mantra rotate? Can go either way. Depends on the sadhana. Depends on the text. It's the exact same thing. Oh, there we have Misa, Himalayan princess. I told you guys I was Twitter famous. Okay, so yeah, so Tantra, I think, preserves those better in the sense that I think that the skillful use of them is more. I think it's more like Tantra places it in a ritually appropriate sort of grammar. But I understand what he was talking about when he was talking about like all those things, and I could even see why it would be useful. So I'm not even dismissing it, but I also think that people, as Solar said, because of this backdrop of the looming daddy issue, father god. But the also other reality is you have to acknowledge whether you think that the magic is you have a more Luciferian or more Promethean, we'll say. I know Jason Giorgiani is both controversial and interesting for some of you. For me, shout out our other buddy Zach. He loved Jason Giorgiani. He begged me to get Jason on the show. Jason, if you're listening, please come on the show or go on Nick's show because Nick is a much bigger show. So he said it's fine if I ask him, and he says yes. I just think so. If you believe that magic is more our thing, that we forged magic, or we kind of forged the knowledge, like okay, the Nephilim, the Watchers. You guys know I don't really. Yeah, that's kind of lame-o to me, but okay. So we forge magic. So just say this. So we're kind of Luciferian. I'm taking on a night journey. We'll call it. We forged magic. We kind of deciphered the rays of Hokmah, if you want to say. Shout out Solar, because that's where I think Odin comes from. But we deciphered the rays. They're the gray smoke. We can really figure it out totally, and we had to kind of play with it. Okay. So if we look at magic in that kind of way, then it doesn't matter if God's real or not real, right? It's not like he's not in our way. It's not saying that. It's just saying like this is our thing. Maybe he doesn't want us to do that. Okay, that's fine. And as we've talked about many times, you guys know there's so much esoterica. There's so much meat, you could say, that will lead you through the threshold in organized religion. Now, do I agree with Matt and Rom and all of you guys that maybe organized religion is a decayed institution? Yes, I 100% agree. I think it is not kept up to modernity. But in a Kabbalistic way, that makes complete sense, right? Because the institution, Bina, it's going to decay. Because who do you have at Bina? You have Kali and you have Mahakala, the destruction of time and the Time King. Okay, so what do you think's happening there between them? Constant destruction, pulling things into gravity, pulling things into density, only to dissolve the matter that appears. So it's both the densest and the most destructive. It's also why every magician loves it, because, as I said, last space, it pulls things into density. It's required for magnetization. It's just a very powerful sphere, and it also is understanding is also one of the places that you don't have to be a skilled magician to reach understanding. That can actually be one of the first things that happens as you walk through. I'm going to call it the threshold. Obviously, guys, you know that's a wordplay on my show, but it's actually interesting because someone else was talking about threshold. Oh, Kenneth Grant, and that is the quote I used for BD's episode. He, in the next line, he's even like, "Oh, we walk through the desert into the threshold of understanding." Like it's just so Kabbalah. Like there's no other way to describe it. Anyways, I digress. Okay, what was I even saying? Luciferian, we forge magic, we're walking through the threshold, okay. Yeah, understanding. Okay, so we're at understanding is the first thing. So understanding is just okay, so since Misa's in the room, let me use a Nepali example. Okay. I've used this before, but I think it illustrates perfectly what I mean. There is a gate in Nepal from the old city that has around it the seven ash or the it's not really sapta matrikas, it's the ashta matrikas, the 8 mothers of the Pleiades. They are very ferocious in tantra, sunken, horrific. Okay, they surround the gate, this one gate. It's an inner city gate that's preserved since the 7th or 8th century. It's very old. If you look at the shape of the gate, it's actually a tantric gate. What do I mean by that? All of the old city around Bodhinath, where our friend, our brother in the lodge, HC25, also has been for a few weeks. So around the giant stupa that you'll see sometimes in pictures, they built several gates, 4 gates exactly. But there's actually other gates. And so if you look at a Kalachakra mandala, you will also see that there's a series of walls and gates. Do you understand what I'm saying with this? The city, the actual city of Kathmandu, is built as a mandala, at least the old city. So there is a way for a tantric practitioner to hold in their consciousness the seed syllable, the bija, or maybe the visual conception of the deity of certain and particular gates that you were walking through. So the walking of the city, gleaning, as the French like to say, as anyone who's taken a film class will know, gleaning is a particularly interesting word because you're both watching in an anthropological way and you're taking in knowledge. That's like true perception, right? Something very Hasidic about that. You're sitting there, you're perceiving what appears before you on the glass like ocean. You are seeing it and recognizing it for what it is. So that's obviously multiple spheres in dialectical synthesis, but it very much has to do with Hesed, who I've relayed, or who I've related many times is green Tara. So what does this have to do with anything? So you're walking around the city, you're acting totally normal, you're not acting bizarro, you're not like, you're not doing anything weird. You're having magical experiences. If you are skilled, if you can wield the upaya to do so in your mind as you walk through the gates. Maybe the gate is where you're at in the mandala. Maybe you're stuck in the mandala. This happens sometimes. Yes, Matt, please go ahead.
It's super interesting. And I wanted to share something since we briefly touched about it, about the Yoruba, that in Brazil, the syncretism became Umbanda, which is basically the Yoruba stuff with some native Brazilian stuff, with some Christianity stuff, just like a mixture of a lot of stuff. And they have this idea of like, I think it would be similar. I could be wrong here because I don't know, but it could be similar to voodoo in the sense that you make some magic with like physical things. You get some stuff for the spirits and so on and so on, and you put into specific places. And they need to put them into crossroads, right? So again, it's like you're using the mandala of the thing. That's very much more folk, right? It's not like you were saying that the thing was planned like this and so on, but you're using the word as like the crossroad, because that's where the energies will collapse, and that's where you have like an access point. So again, if the person can see it, can sense it, it's already there, you know. And then you'll see this in other, like many other examples of like crossroads or places like that. The energies collapse together. So it's very interesting to see that. I think also like with feng shui or something, like you can literally, you can do this, you can manipulate this yourself, right? If you know what you're doing, then you can create the stuff here in Malkuth to interact with all the other planes. So that's very, very nice.
That was so great, Matt. Thank you so much for reminding me of, well, all of that. I appreciate that because it's like not a perspective I always think of. So I appreciate that you spoke. So three things I'm going to touch on, I guess, is the feng shui component. I think this is really interesting. This idea of geomancy, obviously it's a big part of magic, like understanding the ley lines, understanding the energy systems. We always relay it either on the tree, so in a metaphysical way, or sometimes, especially the yoginis in our chat, Avi and Shakti in particular, they will talk about it in an energetic way, right? Like a bodily way, corporeal way. But I think that there's a really interesting thing with what Matt brought up because it also exists, is naturally occurring, does not require us, doesn't even require our perception. But what happens when we are brought into perception of the three things at the same time? That's really, you want to talk about magic? That's magic. If you are able to bring those three kind of we would call it subtle awareness or maybe pristine awareness, but then there's other things also happening because it's not strictly, as Solar put it, Zog Chen. It's not we're not in homage to Zog, but there's other processes happening, especially if you're doing Mahayoga or deity yoga or one of the higher tantras. But if you're mountain man maxing like Solar does, yeah, that's perfectly valid. I have no, like I like Zogchen. It's just like I'm not. I have way too much. I just have way too much overflowing. I cannot contain it strictly in Zogchen. I have to do deity yoga. I have tried. I've like done things where I'm just strictly doing like Dorji practice. I talked about this with Joshua. Like I like Dorji practice and I do it, but I do it in relation to a deity practice. There's just too much going on in my mind. I have to have a meditative focus. Tantra is like perfect for someone like me who just needs like everything. Right? I'm not even saying it like, oh, I'm on my Clydesdale and it's like, ooh, Jin, I'm so great. No, I'm saying that I'm so fucked up that I need all the craziness to help me, to reorient me. I think that's even like what the Temple of Set guy was talking about, like in the backwards and the forwards and like the remixing. It's like there's kind of an obsession with the wheel, and we talked about a lot because of Solar. We talked a lot about this last week. Like, which way does the wheel turn inside of you? Fundamentally, it doesn't matter. Fundamentally, you don't have to like. There's a primordial direction, and that direction is non-dual. It's just like it's very. I mean, Buddhism just like gives it as like a first teaching. It's tantra, like Vajrayana, obviously. It's just, or even the Pranaparamita sutras. It's non-dual. That's the primordial direction. Please, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, and also if you see like in Kabbalah, the Merkaba has the two tetrahedrons, one for the left and one for the right side at the same time, and also the chakras, right? You have them spiraling in front of you for one direction and behind you for the other one. So it's never, because otherwise it's again it's imbalanced. If you have too much of one column, it either, let's say right column, it either it's everything and it's not contained and it's too much, or the other one which is too orderly and it just dies off. So like if you don't have both, you literally would be dead or whatever. there literally wouldn't be you. So it has to be both.
It absolutely has to be both. But and then at the same time, neither nor, right? Never either or, always neither nor. If you remember nothing, if you not remember me in like a year, just remember that it's always neither nor. It's never either or. Simply because that seems to be, the presentation is always dualistic. The way that we perceive reality is dualistic inherently. Our relationship immediately with both Maya and Mara are dualistic because we perceive ourselves as a one, right? We're like the object. Whatever. I'm not even getting to ontological discussion. I'm way too stoned. Okay, so but I think you guys know I would. But I think that there's, it's just the reality is it's non-dual. Try and be non-dual. That doesn't mean no morality. I think that non-duality actually liberates you from conventional morality in some ways because you don't have to be fixed. You don't have to be dogmatic. You can just be, I'm not saying it's always practical, but maybe there is a pragmatism in it. And that's something he also said. He's like, what, like Nick asked him, what kind of magic do you like? He's like, I like things that are pragmatic. I have to agree. I also like things that are pragmatic. What is usable? What can I take of it? But then there's also something really interesting. Well, I wanted to bring this up, but Matt did say other interesting things, but I forgot what exactly my point on it, but I'll come back to it. Something that I thought of for Solar, and I even DM'd him this, was that I didn't really DM this to Solar, but I said it maybe broadly, is that, so he described what Stephen Flowers was talking about with the angles, and obviously in response to your question, Solar, which everybody thought was incredible. Honestly, I blew them away, but I said it was your question. I didn't obviously take credit for it, but it was a great question. But then he was explaining how, like the angles and the keywords and this and this and this. And I was like, okay, that's just Shrivijaya. Like literally, he's just talking about Tantra. He's just talking about like literally our angles are named, the dakinis are named. That's all it is. We just use a different number. We use 6 and 4. Obviously, there are different ways to get there. Obviously, we have a 9 grouping. We have the 72 time kings. So the 72 Bhairavas. Makes perfect sense. Sometimes it's 81. Depends on your text. Even their idea of conceptually like remapping where like what your mind is thinking and like that kind of backwards forwards, bringing that back a little, but not really, because in Tantra you switch cosmologies depending on your text. So this idea was already kind of like, I already was like, okay, this is no problem. Like this is no problem for me because this is something you already kind of know and do. But at the same time, you can carry forward through space and time your practices. Everybody knows I'm fond of particular practices. And this is the same for everybody. If you're fond of particular practices, you're going to maybe practice that even if the text specifies a different deity, a different dakini, a different this. I'm not saying to do that and just remix and make your own thing. We don't really do that. I mean, you can do it to a degree, depending on what your teacher says, depending on how proficient you are, sure. But there is elements where you can take something that you know how to do and you bring it into this mandala. So that was also the point about the city and the mandala, was that there is a way to be like a totally functional person having magical experiences as you go about the world. Because what is reality but magic? Like, yes, every experience that we have, is a lot of them are shitty. I think we all know that. They feel sometimes degraded and they feel sometimes uh it's just like we're trapped in the meat suit. I know a lot of people talk about this all the time on Twitter. I don't like this because I am not antinomian personally. I don't identify with that. I'm not saying the world is like perfect and great and it's like all like, love and rainbows and all that shit. We all know it's not. We all survived COVID. We all survived lockdown, not COVID, but at least we survived lockdowns. We survived the, pull something from AJ. We survived the globalists. We survived the, black bloc. We survived it all. But we really did. We really did. It was like, I mean, as everyone knows, we've talked about this so many times. It was a theurgic process. It was a Kabbalistic experience. We walked through many, many gateways since 2020. Many, many gateways, like many news stories. Those are fucking thresholds. You want to ask me what my show is? The title of my show is? It's about that. It's about how we don't even know. Sometimes we are ignorant about the thresholds that we are walking through at all times. And they are literally all around us. And I'm not saying, but the real trick to it, the real trick to breaking we'll call it the klipa, or the skanda, or the mara of ignorance, is not necessarily to see beyond it, or to be, you know, isn't to be the person who says or knows or discerns, even though all of those things are of course important, to speak truth, to have good discernment. Yes, all those, for a magician, you must have those things. You do not want to be those people who go into what we'll call like a Kabbalistic dead end, a dead angle, we could say. And there are dead angles. And number mysticism proves that. Number mysticism is the foundation for all magic. And the guy even talked about this. He talked about this kind of need to unify language back with math, just like Hebrew. That's why Hebrew is such a good spellcasting language. That's just the truth. It can, as we've talked about so many times, like for anyone who's like a regular Lodge member, I'm sure you're bored of hearing this, but we'll just say it for everyone who's listening, or if you forgot, I forgive you. You have my absolution. But Hebrew has all of this. It has color, it has element, it has number, it has different sounds within it. Like a Chinese character has phonemes. Sometimes, not every Chinese character has phonemes, but many do. And there are radicals. But yes, Hebrew does have all of that stuff. It has a stroke order, just like in Chinese. I always thought that was very profound, because my grandparents used to be like, Jin, write in the correct stroke order. Everybody can see that you can't, like, you're not that good at Chinese. It's embarrassing. That's literally what they used to say. Because you have to write it in the correct order. You really do. It really makes a difference. The construction, right? It's a really a Kabbalistic kind of threshold. It's like a very basic thing. It's like you learn to write the character properly, and then you have a strong foundation for what the word actually means. I don't know. I kind of think that's deep. Okay, Matt, please go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's crazy, because if you think about it, when you're tracing it in a specific position, let's say if you go from right to left or left to right, and you apply that on the tree, it would be the same as doing like either the lightning path or the serpent path, right? So it totally makes sense that one direction would be, let's say, right for whatever you're trying to do. Let's say if you're trying to get something from Atzilut down, you need to go from the lightning path. So you need to go from a certain direction. Let's say from Chokhmah to Binah, it needs to go from right to left and not the other way. And even what is even crazier is you get, sure, everybody knows like 22 letters, the 22 arcana and so on. But then you go to Sanskrit, which is also crazy and has a lot of vowels, which is very important that Hebrew doesn't have. And you have the missing 56 letters. So you have the 78 arcana all in those two alphabets. So like if you learn those two, you're packed, like you're explosive, in the magic you can do. So that's very interesting.
That was great. Thank you, Matt. Okay, Solar, please go.
So not that I'm earning commission on this, but just to, like, I don't know, sweeten the deal a little bit, for Hebrew as a magical language. For people who happen to think this way, and I actually don't think this way, I think kind of the opposite, but for people who believe in the idea of not overusing certain formulae or certain ideas, right? This idea that we sort of guard our knowledge very secretly, because if certain sounds or words or formulae become used too widely, they burn out or lose their potency. So one of the cool things about Hebrew is that, so you have they're called binyanim. They're the basically like ways of conjugating the root stems of any Semitic language, but in this case, Hebrew, right? So there are certain words, certain constructions of stems that theoretically could exist, but are, when I say they don't exist, they're just not in any extant text that we have. So that, like, they never occurred. And then in the reconstructed, like, modern Hebrew, they're not assigned to any, like, word or meaning, right? So they're sort of like nonsense words, but they're like correct theoretical constructions, right? And there are tons of these. There are more of these that are unused theoretically than are actually used in like biblical or classical or modern Hebrew, right? So this is all to say that if you're one of the people who believe in the idea of like having your own sort of like super secret cool magical language, but you're also looking for a way to sort of connect that with an existing sort of system of numerology and things like that, right? Like, well, looking at Hebrew might be a nice, like, kind of hybrid approach because you get a little of both. Just ignore it when they say that, oh, the third, fifth, and sixth binyans of this stem are not actually used. Say fuck that. You can learn how to use them, learn how what the word would look like, what it would sound like, and then you can incorporate that like into whatever work you're doing, right?
Yeah, I love that. Fuck yeah. Okay, so yeah, everybody, we're all on the same page tonight. I could feel it. I could feel the synthesis happening. Obviously, I used a very Tiferatic poster, and that's a different sphere for me, right? Like that's a different Sephira, but I'm trying. I think all, as I always say, all good things are found in synthesis. So, I'm trying to bring all good things to to everyone who's in the lodge and just like beyond, and like talk about, because we're talking about things that they were talking about in Temple of Set like 20 years ago, except we're not doing the old churn version. Like with Solar just told you, that's like real wisdom. That's like true wisdom. And Sanskrit's like exactly the same, as Matt brought up, exactly the same. That's how you derive mantras, that's how you derive dharanis, that's how you derive bijas. So, and they sound like nonsense words, but they do have meaning. We understand like why they appear as they do. But there's a lot of knowledge that has been forgotten, so I can't say it's perfectly preserved. It's kind of like Hebrew in that way. It's like, yes, you can do it if you're super smart, and I'm super smart, but I'm not rishi smart, okay? And it's really difficult. There is ways to derive mantras, but the liturgical language has changed. That's something interesting about Dharma. Pranic Sanskrit, Pranic texts and colloquial languages. There are different. You'd have to use different formulations for each of those kinds of ways. So, and just like there are different kinds of, I'm sure Ram knows, as we talked about this in regards to Hanuman. There's a large variety of what are called Shabar mantras. This is not just for Hanuman. This is for all the avatars of Vishnu, but particularly the more tantric ones like Varaha, Hayagriva, Simha, etc. There are colloquial mantras. It still works. There's still a way to make the seed bloom, you could say, but nothing is as powerful as Sanskrit. So you will see a little bit of discrepancy between tantras that are written almost identically, just maybe referencing a Buddha um, in passing, but the text is almost the same between Indian and Buddhist tantra. Very common, especially at the lower tantra levels. And when I say lower, I don't mean not good. I just mean Kriya tantra, or like the kind of like more wrathful, what everyone popularly thinks of as tantra. That's more kind of the idea, more conceptual, more carnal ground. So Buddhist liturgical Sanskrit is different. It's not the same as Vedic Sanskrit. It doesn't pretend to be the same. This is why you'll see people who are into more of the, Theravada or forest tradition. They will talk more about Pali and the suttas and Dhamma, and like I'm a Sanskrit supremacist. Like I'm just gonna lay it out. I like Tibetan as well. I think it's a great language. I like Chinese as well. Classical Chinese is definitely a casting language. It's just extremely complicated and extremely mathematical, and it requires almost a knowledge that we. It's not that I don't think I'm. Trust me, I know I'm smart. If I thought I could do it, I would totally do it. Okay. So I'm not saying that I wouldn't try. And I do think I'm smart, and I think many of you are very smart, maybe smarter than me. But I also think that maybe we're just lacking some of the foundational knowledge in which to do that. Like I have a lot of knowledge. I'm not like I'm not like a low level tantrika. I'm like an intermediate person. I have a very strong knowledge of the things I have a strong knowledge of. There are still things that it's very unclear. So I think instead of saying, oh, yes, I have like a very definitive map for you, I think the best way and this is what my whole point of bringing up the Temple of Self even was. And I even said this in the chat, and I said this to Matt privately. Tantra and Kabbalah, that's it. That's like, you don't have to be good at Tantra. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the ideas are tantric. The map is the tree. If you know nothing else about magic, just understand those principles. The tree's not even Jewish. The tree, they're really good at it. 100% really good at it, okay? You cannot deny it. Credible masters at it. A very complex thing. It just doesn't originate with them, and that's okay, because it appears in all the other things too. So nobody has to get like, I know Zog, okay, all that. We don't have to play into that. We can just be like, yeah, they're really good at it. Let's take it for what it is. Lurius gets a bad rap. Incredible sage. Ramic, incredible sage. Do we discount that knowledge simply because we don't like modern nation states? I think that's low IQ, personally. So I'm going to continue to read those texts if I think it's interesting. Just like I will continue to read the left-hand path texts, because I do find them interesting. Now, do I think what Stephen Flowers did in regards to Avila do I think that was like a great? No. I think that he should have been more careful. He knows better. He's an academic, or he was. I think he could have been, tighter on that, to cite the actual Tantra, or if he didn't know, to just say he's citing Avila. Just give the citation in its like original format. You don't have to pretend it's from the Tantra. It's totally okay. Nobody reads that shit anyway. People don't even read the fucking Puranas. Okay, Matt, please go ahead.
I was just quick thing. I think I talked about this, or maybe not in a space, but basically, we are so like full of paradigms and boxes that we put ourselves in that it's very easy to disregard knowledge because of its supposed origins. So, like you beautifully said, the tree isn't necessarily Jewish, but they guarded the knowledge and they expanded it very well. They marketed it very well. So then a lot of people will think, oh, that thing is from specific type of people or whatever, and they have this paradigm which is already wrong as well, of like, oh, certain people equals certain thing always, and then they'll disregard completely a lot of the culture. So like, again, this is an extreme mistake that you're making, because if you're not even there to listen or to just take a look, because at the end of the day, if you do, you'll see, oh, okay, this is just like all the other systems. Maybe a slightly different approach here, more expanded, less expanded, different language, but again, they all will come to the same thing. So like, at least have the eyes to see and the ears to listen, to see the thing, because that's pretty much it. It will have knowledge there. You just got to be able to accept it.
Yeah, totally agree. Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah. And again, this is coming from a guy who speaks Hebrew and has a Sonnenrad in his PFP. So whatever that exactly means. If you're not capable of sort of liberating, something like the tree or Kabbalah in general from a maybe a set of beliefs, like if I'm a Jews or whatever, uh, especially with all the tools that we have now, there are so many other ways of understanding it. Like you should be able to psyop yourself, even if you don't right now believe this, that the tree is in fact Persian or otherwise Hyperborean or Aryan or something like that. If you can't make that mental transformation real in your mind, consider that as like your first assignment. That needs to be the first magical operation that you perform, is getting yourself, whatever has to happen in there, like to allow yourself to be able to use this key and understand it in different terms in a freer paradigm. Like that's assignment one. And then once you've accomplished that, you can actually like use it. And I think that would be like a very helpful first assignment no matter what, regardless. Even if you were to like walk away from the whole enterprise after that, just like that exercise will get you something.
Yeah, that was incredible. So a fist bump for that, for sure. 100%. I totally agree. Totally agree. I wish I had said it, because honestly it was that good. Because for real, I think it's useful. I think that is a perfectly it's meta magical, because it's both about the narrative that you believe of the world, and it is also a magical act. So it's both things at the same time that you have to integrate in yourself, in your mind, carry with you through space and time, in the nine, in your skull cup, throughout the world. It's a fundamental belief, a pivotal axial belief. So I 100% endorse that. I think that's a great assignment. I'm not going to check your homework next week, but I do encourage all of you to try and think of that. I do personally also believe this. I think I've spoken about this. I do believe that the tree has like a, I don't know, Indo-Aryan, Indo-Iranian, Persian, Babylonian, maybe even older. I try not to go overly speculative past about 300 BCE. I really don't. I try and just I know Solar is like, okay, but I really try and keep it to the, like, I feel like I can at least articulate the last 2,000 years, the contours, the very broadest of contours of that Central Asian story, of the history of like the I can do the tantras. I think I can do maybe a TA level on the tantras, but I do think that yeah, I think that's a great exercise, and that's also liberating to the wheel, right? That's also letting the wheel be free, because it's not like they sat us down. If you went to Catholic school or whatever, or like a Protestant church or synagogue or temple, or whatever the fuck you went to, they didn't sit you down and were like, yeah, we're in the fourth turning. This is what's going to happen. No, they kind of like were like, yeah, these are some ideas. Maybe you'll find them in our more heterodox canon or not, and you can make of them whatever you make them. That's pretty much how it's been. So we kind of had to remix it, and we kind of did it as a group. That's kind of cool, right? We talked a lot about the metaphysics of history, how it's kind of put together in a chronopoetic way, reconstituted with our ideas, with our perceptions, how we think of the world now. Can a modern person ever ever fully understand what a historical or an ancient person really believes? I don't know. It's interesting. Think about it. But it also brought up something else that Solar talked about. So I have talked about this, about the bijas, about like I'm not saying Solar referenced me. I'm saying that I have referenced it because it is an idea from Tantra that sometimes that you will take the bijas and you will burn them out, but it's in the dialectical synthesis of liturgical speech. So like the what priests do in a normative rightward turning swastika, and then also what a tantrika or an upasaka is doing on the carnal ground. And sometimes the carnal ground exists right outside of the temple doors. So there is this kind of idea that they're both breaking and reconstituting the work at the same time, and that's kind of how it should function. But then once you kind of understand tantra better, you kind of see that that's not quite correct. There's an additional layer where the normative rituals are something to return to, but then you're also practicing, you could call them the nighttime rituals, as we talked about. So I don't know. I think that's very mystery religion. I think it makes a lot of sense to how like he was speaking about language, how Solar's speaking about language, how we think of language in Tantra. Like you can break the bija, you can reconstitute it, but the reconstitution really happens in, to reference something Matt said, in Malkuth, in yourself. So when you rectify or reconstitute two different things, but they actually have an overlapping meaning, but distinct, that happens in yourself. So it's about your ritual performance, your ritual action. Like I practice peaceful deities as well. I'm sure everybody's like surprised to hear that. Yes, I do practice wrathful deities too, so don't fuck with me. But I also do the peaceful ones because you have to. You have to. You should not have an aversion to either or, right? You should be able to have the we're talking about the pole star. a little bit. Shakti brought up the idea of the pole star and I said, okay, I just did an episode with Jigoku Keiki on Myoken, who is kind of the pole star god, and he has 9 or 8 brothers. I mean, you'll hear that if you want to hear it. You'll hear the episode. But it, for us as like Northern Buddhists, Northern Vajrayana, we think of it as white Tara, as Arya Tara. That's why she's fixed. That's why she sits in Padmasana. Her legs don't dangle. If you notice green Tara, one of her legs dangles. Not dangles, but I know that there's a yoga position for it. I just couldn't think of it. So I digress and apologize. But so one leg is outstretched, means that she's going to move. She's going to come into reality and deal with whatever you're doing. But the idea of white Tara is that she is fixed, right? She's fixed in her view, in the primordial view, because who else is she but the primordial consort? The thing that orients us to both bodhicitta and non-duality. She does not come into the world. It's through her grace and her kind of emptiness and her bodhicitta and her compassion and all of those things that compose like what she is, which is really nothingness. But it's not really nothingness; it's emptiness. But it's emptiness. But it's it's the complete apotheosis of sattva, the white, together. That's what she is. It's the purity of that light. It's light so pure it doesn't even have color. It's beyond stainlessness, pristine. So that is like, I think she's fixed. So you're kind of looking at that. And we talked about this last time. So what I'm trying to say with that is that there's the bijas are primordial. The magic words, whether they are the same as they were 5,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 300 years ago, 50 years ago, it doesn't fucking matter. Yes, it matters to a degree. Of course, I do practice a more traditional religion. It does matter. So I'm not trying to say it doesn't matter, but I'm saying that it is possible to reconstitute it. I'm not saying, but the great thing about Aeon of the Daughter is that you don't have to totally reconstitute it, because we have both of these traditional things that have been preserved, and we have the fucking amazing tools left by our forebears, righteous or not, many of whom were not, but we can still take of the fucking tools that they left for us. You know, those magicians who came before, as fucked up as they may have been, we can look to them and we can say, how did you try and rectify the seeds? How did you try and rectify not just the seeds as in the spoken bijas, the keystones, the keywords of the 9 angles, whatever it is. Go beyond that. Think of them as conceptual ideas. One of the best ways to, in my opinion, to penetrate the densities of a Sephira for the first time is actually to use the conceptual idea and the color rather than the word. This is just my opinion, okay? This is just my opinion. This has worked for me. I'm 100% telling you, like, I'm not saying this works for me now, because you change. Your perspective changes. Things densify. And we've talked about this. Matt and I had a dialogue about this last week, is that you cannot visit a Sephira you cannot depend on it too much, because it will begin to densify, and which makes it harder to travel in or through. But if you want, like Solar gave you a work, okay, I'm going to give you another one. I'm thinking Tiferatic right now, because Rom sent me, I know I talked about this in the chat, but I'm going to talk about it on the space because I think it's interesting for people to hear. So there is a great Tantrika, another great Tantrika. I'm not the only one, and I'm not a great Tantrika. I'm totally kidding. He's a much higher Tantrika than me. But there's a Rajarshi Nandi. So I've discussed him before. He was on a very famous Indian podcast talking about real Tantra. And he really understands. Make no mistake. I might be a Buddhist. I can understand what he's talking about in a fundamental way. Okay? He's talking about something very real. So, anyways, Ram sent me a clip talking about how he was talking about the idea of skanda. So, if you remember last week, Joshua brought up the idea of skanda, or the traps, the sort of those klipas that you place before people, the caltropes, as I've likened them to. So that is what a skanda is in Buddhism, but it's kind of the mind. I mean, it's not of the, it is of the mind. It's a construction that you make from your senses. So we discuss all of this. So if you want to listen to that, go listen to that. But he was discussing how skanda, not necessarily in the Buddhist meaning, but meaning the son of Shiva, Kumara, or as we would call him, Vajra Kelaya. We'll get back on. Well, I'll circle back and we'll touch on that after. But so we'll call him Kumara, so the sun, but a very special sun, maybe the adamantine sun. That is a way that his name is translated. So he, as I've spoken about, he holds a spear in his, I guess it's his right hand, because he cast away the tantras of the father with his left. So basically, the story is Rajarshi Nandi was speaking about how important the worship of skanda, this deity who has tantric origins. Make no mistake, he might be a right-handed only deity in normative Puranic Hinduism to this day. However, he is a tantric deity. The sun is a tantric deity. So are you going to say, Jin, did they make a conflation between Rahu? And we know you love Rahu. I know you all know I love Rahu. He's not Rahu. He's really not. He's not the dragon. Yes, could he be described that way? Sure. But he is a son unto none of them. He is not Vishnu. And Vishnu really is, I believe, a conflation. Because as I've said, Vishnu really is the dragon. Vishnu really becomes Rahu in our system, in the Buddhist system anyway. So what does this have to do with what Rajarshi Nandi said? Well, he talked about how important the worship of skanda is. And I also talk about how important the worship of skanda is. Not necessarily the worship of skanda, the god, but this Tiferetic apotheosis of consciousness, Christ consciousness. Now, I agree, there's a point of Christ consciousness where it is a little bullshit. I think you guys know that I'm too traditionalist to be like, have no criticism of it. But I think if we're talking about modern magic, fundamentally, if we're talking about modern magic, we have to also talk about what the key words, what kind of ways we want to describe, articulate, and grow, sort of build a body, a corpus of like how to do certain works. If we're saying the tree is like such a great tool, I think we all of us agree, especially all the speakers, Matt, Solar, and I. So Christ consciousness is just a viable label. Now, is it a klipa? Yeah, it is a little bit of a klipa. So I think that's a good sort of lesson for anyone listening. Obviously, not really the people in our lodge, but people listening, of what that is. It's a word, contains meaning that is important for the magician, but it's not fully contained, and there's part of it that's not really correct. But we're going to use it because it's the best we have, and it does describe something relatively true. So there you go, a lesson on klipas and relative truth. So Christ consciousness can be described as Tiferetic, at least in some of the outer densities. Now, we've talked about how there are different layers, densities. Different people have different ideas. Some say 5, some say 7, some say 9. Okay, depends. So, yes, Matt, please go ahead.
Just something very nice to understand. You're talking about the word and the meaning. So 2 quick things. So first of all, like you said, the meaning is important, because if I give you a magical word, but it doesn't mean anything to you, it's not really magical, is it? If I say gibberish, like, okay, you cannot use it. It doesn't really matter. And another thing, you were talking about it containing. So if you think of a metaphor, there's a concept of I'm not gonna say this in English, but it's like amphora or whatever. It's a Greek thing that it's a container, right? So it's a container, and if you ever saw those, I think it's like from the Bronze Age, that you had the stories on the vessels, on the containers. So that's like some of them, for example. And you have the metaphor. So the meta amphora, you're like putting more information into the vessel, right? So when you use the word Christ consciousness as a metaphor, that's what you're doing, right? It's not really the thing that you're talking about, but you're using it basically to your advantage. And you can, again, as a magician, use this a lot, like metaphors and like wordplay and so on, just because it works. It will work basically. Like if you're talking to someone and they will not get everything they're saying because obviously they didn't study the same things, but you can use like analogies and stuff like that.
So that was great, Matt. Really great. A plus, gold star for you. Proudest. I'm the proudest teacher. I'm not your teacher, but I'll take it for the moment. Your successes make me look more golden, we'll say. Of course, right? Because that is also a Kabbalistic thing. So what I just said was actually Kabbalistic. It was meaning his splendor, his light, his kind of existence in the world. If I'm saying I'm at Tiferet, which is what I said, I'm trying to, bring in Tiferet into my life, or into the lodge space at least. His light will make my gold what? Resplendent, illuminate. It'll make me look better. It's just the reality. This is the thing about magicians too. The more skilled you are, as you would hope that the other people around you are like capable, have the potential to be skilled as well. Doesn't mean doing fireballs in Oxford, like Crowley and the Golden Dawn guys. I mean, that's probably not useful, to be honest. It's probably a little. I mean, yeah, I could see it be fun. Don't get me wrong.
Nah, so if that's not the point, then I'm quitting. If I cannot do stuff like that, then what's the point? I'm joking.
No, but I do think it's interesting because it's like even that example. That's metafiction. Did that happen? I don't know. Probably not, to be honest. Did they make it up? Probably. Was there probably magical battles happening? Yes. 100%. Magical battles are happening every moment in your own fucking mind. With yourself, with the ley lines, as we talked about, with the nature spirits. Everybody thinks they're like some great, interlocutor between you and like the outside forces. No. If you can't even control your own mind, so I'm saying this from my own perspective, from my own fucked upness, that if you can't even control it, like how are you going to control a spirit outside of yourself? This was always fundamentally my problem with some of the, not all, but some of the Afrosyncretic stuff. I felt like I could just stay Catholic, or I could just like be really Catholic. I could really be like total Rosicrucian, right? Because what does it matter? What does it matter? Because I'm not really focusing in on any particular thing. I'm kind of dispersing into the many. Like I have to worship all these different things. I have to maintain this kind of thing. So I might as well just, stay with what I knew. That's why I, so cleverly chose Dharma, because it was also something that I always knew. Now I understand that not everybody has that. Like you might feel programmed, as we talked about at the very beginning, or like Matt very obviously said, and Solar obviously articulated on. It's like, yeah, you could feel fucking totally MK'd by society. Sure. Are they doing magic? Yes. Sigils are magic. Corporate logos are magic. Of course they're doing magic. It's not all to psyop you. Does it serve that purpose? Yes. Do you know what your will is? Do you know what your attention is? Who you've given your attention to? Just like the seeds, they don't they can't affect you if you turn your attention away. Just don't give them attention. Do you ask yourself, have I ever seen Jin retweet a celebrity? I mean, I don't mean in like the occasional joke way that I do. The very occasional. I mean in like a legit way. Have you ever seen me really retweet celebrities? No. I don't give a shit. I don't care. I don't even have an opinion. I don't know who they are. I don't carry their names with me through time and space. Definitely not that. Rule number one. You want to cut someone off, you don't need to fucking put their name in the ice box or whatever that spell is, which does work, by the way. But you don't need to do that. You can just not know their name. You can just say, I don't know their name. You don't know their name. That's it. Don't carry them with you. So that's, but it is like that. So it's like, where do you place your attention? Is the world MK'd? Yeah. We've been MK'd in the post-war time, post-World War II. But like, we're here now, talking about magic. We're freely, openly discussing what even 5 years ago may have been considered Looney Tunes, like absolute madness. What is in many circles still considered absolute madness. Like, I realized this. I recorded with other people, and I was like, wow, I fucking appreciate Grey Lodge so much more. Not because I don't like them. I do like them. But I want to talk about magic. I think about magic like all the time. I think about meta reality, metafiction, and meta fucking magic literally all the time. Now, is that useful? No, probably not the best use of my, intellectual powers or my application of that into the world. My sort of like Binah to Malkuth pipeline, we could say. But it does make, I mean, we live in interesting times. We live in really fucking interesting times. And as you know, I do believe it will be the Aeon of the Daughter, or it is. I do believe it is. But you don't have to take it as something like you don't have to believe it. That's totally okay with me. I believe it. Because I think I proved it to myself. And I think that even you guys letting me do those spaces proved it to me as well. I mean, I'm not saying they were perfect, but I'm saying, like, yeah, I can map it out. I can make a logic proof of it. I can tell you how it kind of arises on the tree even in like a more detailed way. I just didn't want to sound like totally autistic schizo, like Kabbalah master all at one time, right? Where it probably would have been too much. So I did it in like a syncretic, right? Like, in a way, the daughter is Hod, the daughter is Hesed, the daughter is Gevra, and the daughter is Yesod, right? It's kind of a trapezoid, if you think about it. I don't know. Something kind of interesting. But where was I even going with this? Okay, so what I'm saying is that because you have let me, as your mad host, I'll call myself that, as your mad guide through this meta reality that we find ourselves, and our like interesting dynamic. No one can say that the Grey Lodge is not dynamic, that we are not dynamic thinkers, and that our group parasocial relationships are not also dynamic. They're really fucking dynamic. Probably too much, to be honest, but I've come to rely on you in the way that like it provides me with being like, yeah, I'm not fucking crazy. I'm not like, yeah, maybe that's true too, but I think also I just think that like what else is there? Like, Rom teases me for being an old man magician. I'm like out here like Solar and I are like secretly on Discord like reading. Like, I'm reading through the Temple of Set manuals right now. And like I get teased by Rom, oh, you're such a salary man magician. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like, if you were a salary man magician, like, good on you. Like, how can you make your life dynamic and interesting in other ways if you were a salaryman? Well, one of the best ways would be magic. Why? You're already alive, you're already perceptive, you're already conscious. That's all magic really is. Just try and contain it, try and understand it, and try and live it. Try and live it out. Just like the example I tried to give with Kathmandu. Walk through the gates, walk through the thresholds. You don't have to go to Kathmandu. Just recognize that when you walk through a fucking threshold, you are walking through a liminal space, like every day in your life. And the liminal space is a perfect place for a magician to be. It's like one to one. Like everything is, just think of everything as magnets. Everything is plus ultra. That's it. Even with people, and I'm horrible about this, so I'm definitely not recommending like my approach. But I think it's useful to think of interpersonal relationships as plus ultra. Like, what are you giving out? What are you gonna get? Like, if you're like me and you're not afraid of a quote tweet, then you know you're gonna get, like, you're gonna get someone's gonna clap back at you. That's okay. That's okay to me if that happens, because I know what I put out. That's it. Please, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, also because the more we transition to like Aquarius seasons, that's it. There's no more puppy love from Pisces. It's all gonna be air. And you need to expect for those relationships, any of them, like businesses and whatever, to be much more dynamic. It's gonna be the nature of them. So either you adapt or you get behind. It is what it is.
So what Matt said was great, and it brings up that idea of Aeon of the Daughter, because what is air? Air occurs in synthesis, at least in the tantric idea, right? So 31, 3 plus 1 takes 3 to make 1. So you have the fourth, but we know that the fourth is not alone. The fourth always has to be in synthesis to what? To knowledge, to the higher mind, to that consciousness, to perception. You have to be looking at it and understanding what it is, and whether that's yourself, what yourself is. And not to get too off, but this is often something I think people fuck up with Tiferet. And I'm not making a judgment, because I find it, as I've said, I find it a hard suffer for myself. But I think this is where people fuck up, is that there is a distinction between Tiferet and Death. I've often relayed this to all of you guys, and I've said, all of you guys, and I've said many times that, like, yeah, Kenneth Grant was right in a way when he's talking about Transplutonian. He's talking about an unbound reality. Now, he's more on the chaos current than me, and I don't mean chaos current in a chaos magic way. I'm saying there are different polarities in the world. Chaos is one of them, just one. Powerful, but just one. And so that's what his preference was. So his preference was sort of like to, go back up, climb all the way, come back down, climb all the way, come back down. I prefer the Buddhist view. Yes, Solar, please go ahead and correct me if I'm wrong.
No, not a correction at all. There's just kind of something interesting, and it ironically kind of piggybacks on something that you brought up. Rom mentioning, right, that we're these old guys because I guess we're like in our 30s or whatever, so we're ancient, we're out of touch. Not sort of staying at the tip of the spear with regards to Zoomer and Alpha magical practices that are unlocking the secrets of the universe with increasing velocity, which I'm sure is happening, right? But to connect this, it kind of reminds me of um, it was at least like maybe 5 to 8 years ago, whatever the ortho bro kind of push happened, because that was essentially like the young terminally online guys in a certain sphere, like whatever the sort of hard Christian right, Christian alt right, post alt right, whatever, um, doing a lot in that space. But among many other things, they ended up being the ones to kind of revive a lay interest in the practice of hesychasm, right, within the Eastern Orthodox tradition, which is a tradition that never went away in monastic context, right? But it was not something that was sort of well understood or even like taken seriously, or really just considered at all in a typical like lay parish setting. There weren't a bunch of like Greeks or Armenians or whatever sitting around, teaching their teenage, sons and daughters the practice of hesychasm, right? And why am I seizing on that? Because in my mind, that is a practice that is effective, and specifically geared at sort of moving beyond Tiphoretic Christ consciousness and basically pointing the way forward in a very practical way, right? Of proceeding directly up the middle pillar, like that. I'm not saying it's the only way to do that, even within the context of like Christian mystical practice or anything. I'm not a scholar. It's not really my ball game, but it's one that I know of, one that I'm like intimately familiar with to some degree, right? And it did take this sort of like outside weirdo push to kind of like bring this back on the menu, because I think in a lot of cases we like different strains of popular Christian tradition has sort of like specifically lost their ability to go beyond Tiferet, at least in a straight like middle pillar like up way, right? And so you end up being able to get to the fullness of Tiferet, but you're not able to get to the sort of freedom, the unbounded sort of character of a dot or something like that that is possible through a practice like Hesychasm, in my humble opinion.
100%, hands down, another fist bump moment, or like whatever, I don't know. It was great. I know, I totally agree. But we've discussed this. Like, I totally agree with you 100%. Like, the Ortho Bros know what the fuck's going on. They have a metaphysical sensibility. They are magicians. Okay, that's it. That's what the Ortho Bros are. I'm not saying every single one. There's a reason why Jay Dyer follows me and never responds to me. Okay, I've never been mean to him. Never once been mean to him. The only what was I gonna say? The only time I'm never mean to the Ortho Bros. If you've ever watched me in an argument with them, I literally just post the Orthodox tree with the Kabbalah, like the Sephiros mapped on. That's it. I say, no, what's up? Like, you don't have to front. Like, we totally get it. You know, like, that's all it is. Like, okay, stop fronting. And like, they block me. It's literally every time. It's like 10, 20 times. I'm like, no exaggeration. There's nothing wrong with it. Like, just, it is what it is. So yes, I agree with Solar. It is a way. And even I spoke about this with Ashley. Ashley was in our, I think, 2 nights ago, or the 2 weeks ago, or whatever. Wait, I think she was in our first one. I can't remember. Anyway, she was in one of our spaces. She's my longtime podcasting friend. She and I spoke about this on her episode, which has not aired yet, but about how she's very interested in Orthodoxy and why she sees this kind of crossover. You see a lot of the Ortho Bros actually doing sort of Golden Dawn stuff. Will like kind of have interest in some of the more like, I would say, Christian oriented high magic, and or at least that is aligned. Maybe it's not Christian Orthodox, but it's Christian heterodox, we could say. But did they make room for that? And so that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. We should all be magicians. We should all aspire to that. I hope all of you aspire to that. I know, like, obviously Matt and Solar and me, we're already kind of there. But, and I know Rom is there, props to the other Zoomer. Is that, like, he fundamentally understands a lot of fucking deep Tantra shit. I'm not kidding. I'll say things in the chat, which I'm like, yeah, most people won't understand it. I know he gets things. Maybe not the fullness of it, but I know he understands a lot of the Shrivija stuff, and that is some of the most important stuff. Because it's kind of like the Gnostic texts. Like, what are they? Why are they associated together? Who believed in what? Like, very few people are able to really discern it out. Yeah, we have church father writings. Some of them are honest. Some of them are very honest. But then you have other people. Okay, Aquino's a great example. He considered himself really a Gnostic, as Seti Gnostic, in my opinion. This might be totally wrong. But I feel like that he identified himself as that. But his idea of who Set was very different than the actual Sethian Gnostics themselves. He makes the etymological claim that Set is somehow Set from the Egyptian pantheon, and even his origins are questioned as kind of like a Jin god, maybe a Rahu kind of figure of the desert. That'd be a very Rahu kind of figure, a dragon king of the blood ocean. There's nothing more oceanic than a desert. Desert of ash and dust. Something kind of interesting about that. Liminal space. Anyways, the air, the Ahriman, right? But that's not who the Sethian Gnostics even understood Seth to be in any capacity. He was God's greatest warrior and his sister Nuria. So it's all about interpretation. It's all about view. It's all about how things are articulated. That's why I always tell you. That's why I said about the Rom teasing me about being like an old trune and like relying on older texts. You have to be able to relate the text. That's Aeon of the Daughter as well. It's not just make the new. Of course, that's important. You must have the creative, the pioneering. That's why I often say it's about America, because it is about America in some ways. It's about a libertarian, not libertine, and I'm not talking about libertarian as in politics. I'm talking about a Luciferian, maybe that's maybe a better word, inclination to go make something better, but you still must draw from what came before. She rectifies the mind of the father. What is the mind of the father? It's the motherfucking method. So you must know at least some pillar of traditionalism in order to bring it into the future through time and space. Shoot the arrow, make make a garden of flowers. That's what it's all about. So you have to read those texts for yourself. And that's also very Tiferetic in a way. It's also very Binah, right? It's both of those things at the same time. It's like you're reading it, the lamp is flickering, you're seeing the letters move, you're understanding, you're coming into full understanding. It's deep and it's simple. Because just you in a room and a candle and a scroll. And that's a Kabbalistic act, a magical act, a Sephirotic act, an act upon the world with your consciousness, with your perception. That's all it is. Okay, yes, I'm sorry, Matt. Please go ahead.
And if you think about it, if you don't have the foundation, like the older traditions, then you cannot really know what's new because someone could have been just rebranding something which is old and selling to you as a new thing, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I'm learning the new stuff," but it's not really new. It's like just rebranded stuff, and then sometimes that rebranded stuff gets like completely blown away. I can give an example. I was studying the Mayan calendar, like the Tzolk'in, recently, and there was one guy that brought it up again in like I don't know the 80s or 90s or whatever, and but he basically changed the whole thing. He even like changed the date of the start of the calendar and so on. And then I was like, no, what the fuck? That doesn't make sense. Why should I follow the guy just because he's saying and so on, so on? So I went deeper, and I found out some guys which were working with the curanderos, which are still alive. So you still have people from like that region, like Guatemala and so on, which preserved the calendars and the cultures and so on. And then you have new like youngsters which got the tradition and upgraded it. And honestly, again, when I saw it, my head was crazy because again, they did have like a tree of life and a lightning path. So it's like again Kabbalah, but anyways, that's not the point. The point is, if I stopped at the new shiny thing that I first encountered, I would be going to a like gibberish route because I could not compare like the tradition because I didn't know, right? I'm not Mayan. But if I went a little bit more deeper, then I found out, oh, okay, so that's really where it's coming from, and then I can see why they are updating. So it's like a slight update, so a slight different point of view of like merging with systems, just like a slightly different way of organizing and so on. But it has the foundation, it's based on something. Otherwise, it's just gibberish. Like I can invent here the new religion and whatever, people just believe in it because that's it. But there's no point, right?
So I think this is super important. I think this relates a lot to cult networks, and I'm using cult in the more pejorative way. Magical cults specifically. This is the problem, is that they all pretend to have historical roots, but they are modern knowledge, meaning that they're often channeled. This is problematic. I would say there's a Kabbalistic reason this is problematic, and I would also say that there's just a truth reason this is problematic. So, again, exactly what Matt said. You have to read the text for yourself. You have to be able to discern things for yourself. Number one. However, you're not the sole source of discernment. Very important. I'm not saying someone has to be your guru or your teacher. Of course, if you want to follow Dharma, yeah, you should have a guru. If you don't have a guru, that's okay. You can say the 7-line prayer to Padmasambhava. You can pray to Milarepa. I know he's very popular among some of you. Longchenpa, Tsongkhapa. You have options. No one is ever stuck. You're only stuck on a marga because you choose to be. I know that that is like a cliche, and I do hate a cliche, the first to say. But I do think there's truth to that. And sometimes it's not a matter of even moving from the path that we are on. And this is a mistake a lot of people make. It's a mistake I've made in the past. And sometimes it's just a matter of view, a matter of perspective, a matter of looking somewhere else on the same path. We are not moving. Maybe we're just moving our head. Maybe we're just sort of adjusting our perspective. And so I think that that's a really useful tool as well. And I think that also goes a lot with Matt said. You have to be able to understand, using that word specifically, you have to understand the world, around you. You have to know the words for things and also their meaning in order to navigate around them or through them or with them. You have to, so that's why the traditional knowledge is important. It doesn't mean you have to totally stick to it. You could totally treat it conceptually. That's what I'm doing with a lot of like I'm not a big Norse person, but like I'm reading the Stephen Flowers book. I read Runa a couple weeks ago. When he talks about Tantra in it, I kind of roll my eyes and I'm like, okay. Like he fundamentally is taking from it, but he's not really acknowledging it. That's fine. It doesn't matter. I'm not offended. We're not gonna do we're done with purity politics. It's not 2016 anymore. And Bernie's a total libtard, so we're moving forward. And yeah, I just think that it does come from Tantra. I think that they were doing very transgressive and very creative, I think both at the same time, things in that region. And I think there's no wonder why all of them have like we'll call it a peripheral fascination, meaning more occulted, meaning that they are very much influenced and enjoy the materials, especially the not Garden of Pomegranates. The John A. Woodruff book, Arthur Avalon. I'm forgetting the name. I'm really sorry. I'm looking right at it. Anyways, I mean the cover. It's red with gold. I think they all read that book. And so it's very clear to me because a lot of even their ideas, you could see how Calvinists, to bring something up, Solar said, would derive certain meanings from Kali Kola, where they would take from it, where a Buddhist would also derive different meanings, where a Kali Kolist would derive different meanings that they would argue is the truest, obviously, because that is their system, their perspective, right? So I just think that what I'm saying is I think there's a reason why these kinds of ideas sort of form the foundation of a lot of this metamagic, modern metamagic, post-war metamagic, we'll say. Babylon working, plus ultra, all of that. And I think it also shakes the foundation. So this is something I thought was really interesting. Like, yeah, I think the antinomianism is like a big lar personally. Like, yeah, that's fine. There's times in your life where you're like that. I understand. I've been like that. Totally get it. But you change, you evolve, you grow, your dynamism. That's what I think. We're dynamism, so we're gonna change. So our perspective changes. So I'm not antinomian anymore. Why? Because I changed it. Because I didn't want to be like that anymore. That's just for me. I mean, you guys can do whatever you will. But, I think that that's a more tantric way too, like more skillful, more adaptable. Also more in line with bodhicitta. So again, dependent on view. Everything's always dependent on view. And I think that's what I liked about the example with White Tara, is that it's fixed. It's the primordial truth. But it's also light. So is light ever really fixed? No. Is emptiness ever really fixed? No. It's pristine, it's empty, it's luminous, it's massless, it's floating in space. It is space. It's beyond space. Something else. So, what contains it all? Well, as you know, I will answer in the way that I always answer, is with love. And that's how you contain knowledge as well. You have to, like Solar was saying, you have to take the flowers or the bijas or the seeds, you burn them up. But do you know what you do when you burn them up? I saw the sad face, Joshua. But when you burn them up, you actually take, so you still take of the flux, right? You're still taking of the ash of like the metallurgy. You're taking what is Neptunian, you're bringing it back down through the fire. Through the fire does like a process, it turns it into what? Prime salt. With that, it's a crystal, can create something, right? What do you create with it? Grow a garden of crystals, grow a garden of pomegranates, whatever it is. I don't know. I think that's kind of interesting. I was going to talk about the Donald Michael Craig book. I even have it open, but I won't subject you guys to my reading. I know that's been ill received in the past, but I think it's fun to do that, and I think we talked a lot about Tiferet as well. I do want to talk a little bit about politics, not because we're necessarily a political space, but because we're a plus ultra space. So we do believe in a general way, at least, that that metaphysics affects reality. That obviously includes politics, but there's also a metaphysical layer in politics that affects reality as well, right? Because where do we put our attention? Attention is kind of that magical formula that if we don't put our attention somewhere, the meaning is less. It's also occulted, but the meaning is less. The potency is less. The potential is less. So, very interesting things where John and I live. Very interesting. It does look like I was perhaps correct in my prediction that we are looking at a Hapaborean Templar futurism. So this is a new aesthetic for you to think of, Rom, and do some pictures for me. So Hapaborean Templar futurism. So that actually looks like it's happening. CBC is even reporting on the Greenland deal being finalized, so that's really interesting. So I don't know. It's wild times. It's definitely the time of decoherence. It's definitely the pink ray. Everything that we talked about in the spaces in December. I'm not saying that it was totally me. I don't think it was. I think it was like us in synthesis, us talking about pink ray shit. I think it was like on some kind of, like, it was very pink ray. It was like very clearly azotic. Even at the moment, I was having magical experiences in some of the spaces. And I just feel like maybe that led to some of my wilder speculations. But I also feel like it came true in a way. In a way, it's not about predictions. Remember, this was like one of the spaces we talked about the power of prophecy and why it's also bullshit. So, because it's mutable and it's also containable in other stories, in other acts, and it's also remixable. That doesn't mean it's not real. It's like astrology. Is it real? Yeah. Does it mean planets? Yeah, maybe. Can it mean alchemical bodies? Yeah, probably. Does it mean something like vast and out in space? I don't know. Does it? Can you prove it to me? It's interesting. I'm not saying we can't visibly see things. I believe we can visibly see things. I agree to that. I agree to that consensus reality that there are astral bodies in the great ether above us. But alas, I cannot prove it, and neither of you can prove it to me. But maybe that's what the tree ultimately is. Maybe that's what the tree is. It doesn't even matter who it came from. Like, even if it's like some like proto Hyperborean, proto Atlantean, like 10 million years ago civilization of like, I don't know, I don't even know the alien names, but whatever. It's some like it's a Saturnian golden age, okay? Whatever that is, whatever those people look like. Maybe they were like Anubis people. And they all had shiny black crystalline heads. I'm just saying, maybe that is what they look like. But okay, I digress. So whatever that was, maybe the tree comes from that. It doesn't matter. Fundamentally, it doesn't matter. It's like what we do with it and how we're going to approach things now. That's what I'm interested in terms of like Anne of the Daughter. That's what I'm interested in for Grey Lodge. You don't have to agree with me. Obviously, I'm very open. I think that's probably part of my issue in terms of interpersonal relationships is that I often will admit to being flexible, where I am flexible to a degree. But I think that my flexibility perhaps is tempered by the fact that I think I'm smart. So maybe that is also my sort of my skanda or my klipa that I have to overcome. And it's not that I think I'm the smartest. I don't think that at all. I don't even think I'm particularly special. I definitely don't have that, what do they call it, tune-in syndrome. Tune-in, if any of you watch anime. I know Monty went, but if you have that 8th grade syndrome, you believe you're the main character of your own thing, but you also are. So that is also true, but I don't personally believe that of myself. But I do think that, I don't know. I just think that the things around us that give us meaning, what I'm trying to say is that the Grey Lodge is what has kind of formed my ideas now. So it's interesting even to be in this space talking to you right now, where I've come all this way. So much stuff has happened, good and bad. Good, I would say, in the way that Grey Lodge has connected me with like this line of thinking that seems very avant-garde. I know, Rom, I'm not avant-garde. Okay, fine. But I feel like it's something more, it's something beyond what other people are talking about. And it's not just me, it's all of us. Like I said, it's like this synthesis that's happening right now. And it's not just us, because there are Zoomers, there are, fairness to them, there are Zoomers talking about this on YouTube, non-duality, and magic, and reality shifting, and time bending. I don't know if it's real. I mean, I'm just saying, they think they can do it. So I think they need to bring it into a little bit more materiality, but that's me. Okay, Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, on a really low level, just while we're talking like political stuff, like kind of current events, but tying it back to what you were saying, I happen to think that we have a really good opportunity right now to watch people who are pretty good at what they're doing, sort of in action, right, from this kind of neutral position. So, great example. I think it happened within the last week was the JFK quote unquote like disclosure stuff, right? And to me, like this is a wonderful example of like a well executed sort of ritual exercise, right? So we have this at the sort of first level, right? This performative disclosure, right? But then we have all these kind of attendant like sub routines going on, right? So there was the apparently like attempted but incomplete redaction of the everything related to the state of Israel, right? And so like what is this doing? So on one hand, it's this maneuver to kind of recapture the most kind of normie and gullible section of the base that has been in revolt under the banner of MAGA, right? It's like, hey, our guys are in control now. You can come back into the fold. The government is on your side once again. Just keep trusting the plan, guys. Like we're on the inside now, right? We're not trying to burn it down from the outside. So that's like the 60%, right? The sort of the most normie, like 60% of the people who would care about this. But then for the more radical element, relatively speaking, it splits them, right? Because by fumbling, quote unquote, again, I think this was completely intentional, by incompletely redacting it and having there be this kind of the appearance of intrigues around the JQ, right? Just the fact that it's Israel, it's Mossad, whatever. You're going to then fracture another like key demographic among the people who would not be brought back into the fold. They're not normie, right? They're pilled on the JQ and all this stuff, right? Well, they're going to now go nuts, absolutely down the rabbit hole. They're going to fill in every blank in their mind, even though nothing in the documents, as far as I've been able to tell, actually says, "Oh, the Mossad did it" or whatever. Nothing like that, right? But just the hint of Jew Israel related intrigues, it was a Mossad operation. Like they're going off, right? And that's a bad look for everyone else. So then the sort of the remaining radical kind of factions, sub-factions, whatever, of just people, who are not, who don't believe that it was this, it was all the Jews, right? Who don't want to be brought in to, they're not going to, oh, the government's now my friend again, right? They're kind of left trying to get rid of the stank of the crazy Mossad conspiracy people. And I'm not saying I believe that Mossad did or didn't do it. That's not the point, right? My point is that I think this entire disclosure was sort of shaped in such a way to fracture the sort of demographics that they were targeting by this in really intentional ways, really effectively. Same way with like the way, this isn't last week, but the previous week, of how they have tied the deportation sort of policies to criticism of Israel, right? So now they're making people who want free speech with respect to anti-Semitism laws, they're making those people very reluctantly defend some wacko radical Palestinian, immigrant, blah blah blah, right? So they're forcing people to be really unhappy coalition partners. They're forcing people to make concessions they wouldn't otherwise make. Anyway, to me these are just like really strong examples of like well executed and well designed kind of psyops or PR campaigns, however you want to phrase it. Low black magic, right, is I think an interesting frame. And I think again we can just kind of see these things, see these gears turning, see the way that this is deployed, and we can learn from it, we can observe it, and we can choose how we want to respond, if at all.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I'm so glad that you brought this back to like a contemporary political space from my meanderings. I totally agree with that. There's like no better way. It's like angles among angles. That's instantly what I thought of when you said the fracturing. So I'm gonna let Matt go, but I thought that, and I think it's an interesting way to think about it.
It's if you think about it, it's literally when you go to a magician's show, the way they can apply the magic on you is because they are removing your attention from the place they want to act on. Let's say they want to get a hidden thing or whatever, right? And they put your attention elsewhere so that they can make the magic. And when you look back, it's like oh, the card popped up or whatever the magic was, right? So again, we come back to what Jin was saying earlier, that the attention then becomes your weapon and the weapon they have against you. Because if they can put your attention into random things all the time and you're like just jumping like a monkey from, branch to branch to a different thing every week, then you lose that power because you're just empowering their narratives, which a lot of the times is just a meta narrative to create something else. Like Solar was saying, it's like some completely different thing. And I think as a rule of thumb, honestly, just if you're going with a lot of people, like if you're going with the masses, you're probably not going to the best place. Like I can see this. Like, not that you should always be the schizo believing everything is rigged and blah, 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 but basically just try and think for yourself first and try focus on your. I think Jin said this. I don't remember if it was in a space or in a tweet or whatever. But if you think about it in the Kabbalistic way, you have first your body, then your family, then your home, then you keep growing your surroundings. Because if you cannot even control yourself, then who cares what the fuck is happening in like a country thousands of kilometers away from you? Literally, you cannot do anything about it. Like you have to control yourself first. Like that's the first arcana, the magician until the hermit. You have to control yourself. Then you can extend to trying to control the outside, right? Otherwise, you're just giving away energy to others.
Fuck yeah, 100%. If I said that, I actually did say that, so I remember saying that. But I'm glad I did because I said, well, maybe Matt redacted me, so I sounded smarter. But as I told Matt, I only accept vanity clips. So if Matt ever wants to clip me in a space, he knows it's only vanity clips for my intellect, obviously. But no, I obviously I agree because I said those words, and that's really fucking good advice. If you can't control yourself, how are you going to control your home? If you can't control your home, how are you going to control, you know, how you fucking react to anything? Like, you are Malkuth, so you have to be in total, like everything. We're already aggregated at Malkuth, okay? So we have to also clarify. We have to also be in the process of constantly clarifying, discerning. So I think that's also the point that Matt brought up. It's like, do we go with the populist rhetoric? There are times that I think it is good. I think the populist rhetoric was really good during Biden. The MAGA, I'm talking about MAGA populism. I think that was actually useful because it kind of counterbalanced with a Gevurodic fire, very MAGA red, the kind of bullshit that were happening that was very Hasidic blue. Now, we're in 2025. We fucking won. Where are we at? Like, I love the idea of like bringing up the JFK and the sort of like the Epstein thing because it ultimately doesn't fucking matter. Okay, Pam Bondi was never. That's not her role. If you understood the parapolitics of it, she's a Scientology spokesperson. That's not good or bad. I'm not saying it like that. I don't care fundamentally. Just saying she was there as like a press person, sort of like play. That's what I personally think. I'm not saying it's a fact. This is just what I think. It's just I think she was there as sort of like a release person, like a person to kind of like make sure that the greater organizations or like the process umbrella or the Scientology umbrella doesn't look bad. That's fine. I don't even care. I'm not saying it like in a Russian Cosmos way, fuck that dude, but I'm just saying it in like the it's just it's just outside of my control, happened like even before I was born. You know, I don't know. I can't fix it. I can't control it. Now, can I reimagine it as a magician? Now, that's where I think I can bring some kind of glimmer or interest or like maybe spark of splendor to a story. Is I do think that the story of him being the last druid, I'm not saying he's the last druid. I'm saying there's something interesting about the story that he was the last druid, right? And we know he was very close friends with who? Sukarno, Indonesian president, right? During the same time. A third way. Considered himself he didn't go to the Soviets and he didn't go fully to the Americans. He was always in the middle pillar, you could say. He was also a Dukun. Also a Dukun. He had a magical charis that came from, well, they say the 1100s, so maybe that's a magic number, who knows. But that's what they say. It was like forged, it was like part of Indra's lightning bolt or something like that. They have a whole story for it. So it's cool. I mean, like if you're interested in like Indonesian history and like Indonesian magic, and which is Tantra, really, and Kabatinan, and then Islamic magic came later. So then you do have Kabbalah, but it's just an Islamic kind of Sino-Islamic version is really, so it's kind of interesting. I have to look more into it. But where was I going with that? Okay, so he was friends with that, so that guy's a wizard. Okay, so I'm just saying speculatively that guy's a wizard, JFK's a wizard. Well, we know that like Dana tweeted today, like Howard Hughes' lawyer did some weird kind of thing where he was in Dallas at the same time and he was meeting with like agency people doing something else. Well, that's kind of interesting because Howard Hughes was a magician. That's what the Mormons thought, at least. That's what was happening when he went to that little mini. It's not like a mini tower place in Vegas, but it was like not a. It wasn't one of the huge. I think it was like Tropicana or something like that. Anyways, he rented out like the. That's right. Okay, so yeah, he rented out like the first three or the 3 floors, something like that. And he drew all the blinds, and he would talk to people that weren't there. And this is just like secondhand reports. Obviously, I don't know if this is true. But that's kind of a hallmark of someone who is in contact, as Heidi would say, with their HGA. I would say that would probably be true. And it's clear that he was deeply involved in magic and with Parsons, and just like Elon is, just like doing the hand signals like all the time, dude. Wearing black, the black hat. It's like modern Zog 101. It's like what are you doing? You might as well just wear the fucking robe. I'm just saying. It's like so obvious. So I think that there's other things that are even going on that I don't even really fully comprehend almost. But I do think that we are in a time of decoherence, and then Solar also did say like this fracturing that is intentional fractionating from the whole, the coalitions that were made, uneasy coalitions. Totally, that seems true. And so, like, that's why I was trying to emphasize, and I don't know, maybe this is wrong. Maybe in a year I'll think back on the space and be like, or these spaces, and say, why did I ever say that it doesn't matter, we have to think towards the future? Because I actually think that that's more useful. Because the useful is like, not the useful, the future is what we make of it right now. I know that's a super cliche, but it's also true. Yes, Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to both correct myself, and there's kind of an interesting thing here. So it wasn't the Tropicana; it was the Desert Inn. And it's kind of funny that we both misremembered it as Tropicana. I swore like that was correct when I gave you the thumbs up. But anyway, since we read Young, right, and we brought up the Ortho Bros and the sort of like history of the monastic tradition within Orthodoxy, there is something very interesting, right? Because as far as I know, he was like under extreme lockdown and sort of like watching movies the whole time and like never leaving and anything like that. He basically turned it into this like one man like hermitage, right? He sort of like he made the desert of the monastics this sort of like barren scorched wasteland, like from which you could only like receive the signals and the spirit of the divine, right? He sort of like recreated that, but in this sort of surreal like low mid-level Vegas hotel with movies and isolation and stuff like that. I don't know. To me that's like again thinking through the Jungian imagery there. That's very very bizarre. But I just wanted to correct the record too that it was Desert Inn.
Oh, no, I appreciate that. And honestly, knowing now what I know about Mormons and sort of like understanding a little bit of that Puritan Martinist intersection in the very earliest days of the 13 colonies, I think that they actually, I feel like it relates in a weird way. Joe Smith, he did found fucking Las Vegas. I'm just saying. There's something like, and then they built like Luxor and all that Egypt shit. That's not an accident. Or like even the Eiffel Tower, people way underestimate that has some kind of metaphysical value, even if you just say it's symbolic. But if you say maybe there's more to that, I do posit that monuments, particularly those kind of monuments that can serve as lightning strike receptacles, you could say, that does shift the dragon ley line. If you build something that massive, that would have etheric or karmic implications. 100%. No question about it. Especially steel. Because what is steel? Steel is something that's uniquely ours. And when I say ours, it's not, I've never smelted steel. Or maybe I have actually, but never like as a profession. But there's something fundamentally of man that's like it's a totally forged, it's something. So it doesn't matter if it's a cheap desert inn, is what I'm saying. In the American, or not a cheap, I shouldn't have said cheap, but it doesn't, even if that idea is true, or like that's true, he turned like the 60s like gaudy. I can only imagine like what Vegas was like. Probably cool in my opinion, but okay. So looking back, yeah, probably cheesy. And so he turned that into a hermitage. I think that's a perfect way. But even like the name. That seems to have a meaning. They were obsessed with desert fathers. I mean, look at parts of the Four Corners region, that Navajo region. It's fucking desert. They understood fundamentally that there are parts of America that, whether or not those are the places that the Bible, the prophets, I shouldn't say the Bible people, the prophets rode through, right, on their camels and donkeys, etc., etc. It doesn't matter, because maybe those places have a metaphysical relationship. That's at least what they thought. I'm not saying that's true. I'm not even saying that I believe that. I do personally think that there might be an implication, though, between geographies, and there is a way to understand it maybe through landmarks, not just those that arise naturally or spontaneous, but maybe also that we build. And that is kind of the thing of America, isn't it? It's like the ultimate place of the builder. It's like everything in America is like laid out. The tools are and I'm not just talking about America as in like necessarily the borders of the United States of America, but I'm talking about like this more maybe synthesis of like somewhere between like, oh, I don't even want to get into this, but like a kind of, it's like founding fathers, maybe a little like Rousseau, maybe a little Locke and Hobbes. Like it's all mixed together. It's all like, there's like some Mohawk shit. There's like some French republicanism. It's all mixed together. That's what the American experiment truly is. It's like all of these roots, to bring up the thing that Matt brought up about Yorubas. It's like the roots of civilization. It's like the roots of the world. Well, that is very American too. It's like pulling together all these things, synthesis, forging it, giving you the compass. That's even, I always thought that when I was a kid, like there's something about American citizenship, like how people used to speak about it, just like with like a almost like a reverence. And I used to think, how cheesy is that? But then I kind of realized, like, yeah, I understand like why people that are like immigrants from some third world country, like, okay, so let's say like Vietnam, I was like, yeah, I understand why they like love America and act like that, like they act like they really care about whatever, their passport or their citizenship, because it makes sense, right? You came from somewhere that's a restrictive, I'm not even saying Vietnam is that restrictive or whatever, I don't know. I'm just saying that they felt constrained, and they came to a place where there had a degree, or they felt they had a degree of cognitive liberty. But maybe it's not just felt, maybe there is something about the land, and I'm not saying it even in an indigenous way. I'm saying maybe there is like a spirit, a freedom spirit, a liberty spirit that is of the land. That would be a very Ahrimanic energy, a very forth turning, spirit of the air, Aeon of the daughter. She rides the dragon, tames the dragon, she tames Rahu. That's exactly what we're talking about. And the Mormons also believe this to a degree. They even wrote about Nuria. I was shocked when I read this. And the reality is like everyone has been into those Gnostic texts, and not just Nag Hammadi. People place way too much emphasis on Nag Hammadi. Those are just that's fine if you want to read those. There's tons of other Gnostic texts that existed hundreds and thousands, or not thousands, but hundreds at least years before, and that are just as interesting and just as edifying and just as fruitful and have as many interesting ideas. And if you want to include the Nag Hammadi, that's great too. Just be discerning and know that you should read the text for yourself. But again, to the point, the Mormons were reading these texts. They clearly were taking Gnostic ideas. But what are Gnostic ideas? We don't know. So every idea that we take from Gnosticism, the broad spectrum that it is, are based on our own preconceptions of how we think the text should be read. I'm saying, sort of my thesis is that non-duality is a keystone to understanding those texts. That's where I feel like the Mormons went wrong. That's where I feel like those kind of like transgressive other magicians went wrong. That's even where I feel like the Temple of Set guy goes wrong. Because I respected him. I instantly respected him as like an intellectual um, equal or superior, and as well as a like master magician. It's not, I don't have to like him or agree with him on anything, but I instantly felt like that, that kind of like degree where you're feeling like oh yeah, like this guy seems to really understand some deep shit, so I'm gonna listen. So but I do think they went wrong. I think that like having a kind of oath to antinomianism is as retardsville as having an oath to sort of like a utopianism, because it's so impractical. It's so beyond like anything in our world. Like we have real problems. There are real problems like right here, right now. We need to figure out a way to both navigate the world and also like fix it where it can be fixed. Rectify what can be rectified and burn the fucking rest. And I'm not saying burn the rest in like a BLM way. I think you all know this. But I do kind of think that there is a point in destruction. Now, this is like a more evolved opinion. Certainly during lockdowns, I was more of that kind of like, oh no way, we have to preserve this, mud traditionalism. But that's bullshit. Come on, that was a clear dialectical trap that they trapped us in. That they said, yeah, you have to go so restrictive, tradcath. And like the thing is like I'm not anywhere near tradcath. That's the funniest thing is like, yeah, I am conservative, small c, in my personal life. I really am, sincerely. Do not like to discuss sex. Do not like, yeah, I'll make a racy joke once in a while, like a dad joke. But it's just these are just not topics that I'm super comfortable discussing. So I just feel like there was an inclination for me to be like, yeah, traditionalism, but really it's small c conservatism. It's just being honest. It's just like I believe that there should be a private part of yourself that isn't shared with everyone, and that's okay. Okay, Matt, please go ahead.
Nice. So just a quick tidbit on when you're talking about like creating this things that can harness the lightning, right? Like the Eiffel Tower or whatever. If you think about it, it can be either somebody knows that there is a vortex of energy there, so they create the thing already to be able to harness it, and then you have this week everyone talking about the pyramids again, so on and so on. And like you said, when you create something, it actually then starts to shape the ley lines and the energy around it. Another thing you were talking about in America, how people maybe like they feel like they're free there. I see something in Brazil where, because I guess all of the mixtures, because you have communities from people from all around the world, like Europe, Middle Eastern, Asian. You have people again from Africa, like from everywhere, basically. Even North America, like the place that I was born is called Americana, which is like American because it was fucking colonized by guys after the Civil War. They went to the fucking Brazil because they still accepted like some kind of businesses that uh, in the US weren't available anymore, basically. So then again, you have all this mixture where then it makes it so a lot of new things can flourish, right? Not saying that's 100% good as well, because then you have a lot of bullshit. You have a lot of crazy people saying a lot of stuff like Reiki from the Turner Cats and whatever, like some crazy stuff. But it is what it is. Yeah, that's what you get from it. And finally, you were talking about the private life. That's something that I learned recently from the Hyksos. So basically, you have this concept of a private life and a public life, and then they had like this rituals for the, I guess it was the day and the night. So every day, let's say every Monday, on the day you would do something, and on the night you would do something else, like a specific ritual and so on. You would focus on specific. It's kind of like you could say astrological, even astrological magic, right? Because each day would be associated with a specific plan or whatever. They wouldn't go as far, but they would do something like this, and they had this concept really like well into them. And then you get again to the, if you want to connect this magically, you have the 14 parts of Osiris, 14 pieces of Osiris that you divide in seven. So you have seven internal and seven external, seven analogical, seven digital, and so on. You can make all these things. And one last thing, Live Saturn asked, I think this was a while back, but I just saw it now. Who was the last druid you guys were talking about? because she got in a little bit late. She didn't get it.
Thank you, Matt, so much for saying that. We will close it out pretty soon here. I know it's super late for you. It is 9:33, so it's a good magic number. I know we're fond of those in this room. But before we close, and if Solar has anything to say, welcome anything that he wants to say. But before that, I will say, I think we got through most things of the space. I know I did promise book club, and it is book club, and I do encourage you, all of you, to read it because I'm also reading it. And we can discuss it, and I don't mind discussing it, but I do think it is good for us to have like books that we're reading together and thinking through. I wouldn't mind reading one of the more left hand path books, but I just have a lot of criticisms of it, and I think it's better maybe if I just explain it more of a traditional tantra. Not that I'm super traditional, but I'm relatively traditional in my approach of like the material, at least. And so I think it's better maybe if you hear me say that and then you can look at those texts for yourself rather than me add my preconceptions. Do I think I'm right? Yes. Do I think I'm, Matt and I tease each other. Do I think I'm good at Kabbalah? Yes. Like for a non Hebrew speaker, I think I'm almost as high as I could go. If I learned Hebrew properly, I probably could do a lot better. I would do a lot better. But you know what? It's okay because I do have Tantra. I'm committed to Buddhism. And I'm also have to say that I have grown, as I've said many times, both privately and even on this recording. So I'm probably going to listen back and think cringe. But I have come to think that my best work happens with you guys and happens in synthesis and happens because of the lodge, even though I'm not personally inclined to like groups or people in general. Okay, Solar, please go ahead.
Sorry, I was just doing kind of end of session like bookkeeping stuff. I wanted to say I'm looking forward to discussing however much of the book we end up biting off for next time. And maybe in the next couple of days we can just work out something in the group chat to try to, and then maybe post about just a discrete amount of the book, more or less, so people, it's not just like, oh, maybe like read this 500-page book, but people, if they want to follow along both within and without the lodge, could just have a more doable bite-sized portion for next time. I think that would be good. And also, I don't bring it up to discuss it because, again, it's the end of the night. We're all fried, and I don't want to bring up something that's maybe a little bit more niche. But just for maybe another perspective on the role that consciousness has in the establishment of, the axis mundi, the ley lines, and how symbols become sort of established in the world. I just want to point to the Heidegger short essay, "The Origin of the Work of Art." It's a difficult piece. It's super, super dense. But just to, if people are sort of interested in that process, maybe from another angle, not necessarily a mystical angle, although at that point it's like mystical philosophy, whatever's going on. But I just wanted to point at that essay that might be of interest to some folks relative to Vegas. And because I think there's a sense in which America is simply the place that we realize that we can create a new world tree. We can set the axis or axes of a new understanding for ourselves, and we can constantly be doing that and revising it in real time. And we've embraced that more consciously, perhaps than any other civilization, has before. And that's like the kernel of the freedom that we have, is just that understanding that we can make this for ourselves.
Yeah, that was beautifully said. I love that. I totally agree with that too. I think that is like that's the spirit that I'm speaking of. So I'll just borrow Solar's words. And yes, to me, all of the continental stuff, like I had to read some of it for film and for certain art history classes. To me, there is a lot of metaphysics in all of that. Like, I'm not just talking about. I personally think it all comes back to Kabbalah. I feel it. Feel like sometimes they're talking about things that feel very deep, that have more of a Sephirotic layer, you could say. But okay, so say that you don't believe that. That's okay. You're more of a normie. I 100% endorse and encourage all philosophy. Like to read it. Like to read it for yourselves. Think of anything. What came out of like the millennial, like right wing boys Twitter that was cool was that books are fucking cool. That you should read. that you should read for yourself, and that you should be like a source of discernment. I'm not saying you should be the only source, but you have to be the first, like sort of like antibodies. You have to be like the first line of defense for your own like psychic well-being, for your own mind. But I think if you have like some of these tools, then you can approach like a variety of texts and not be super offended, not be super, preconceptual. Like, you don't have to carry the words that other people have said about something. I'm not saying to do it or even to agree with it. Maybe there's a power in disagreeing. There's a clear Kabbalistic power in the ability to say no, to say I disagree, and why. Because the why backs up the rest. Like that is the foundation to the word. It's the foundation to the refusal. So it's important to also understand why. But if you have to bluff, you can just say no or I disagree. There's a lot of power in that. And I think that's also something that COVID or lockdowns or whatever the fuck that was, whatever happened, to say I disagree in those moments where it's fundamentally very difficult. Maybe there's huge financial, life, familial, romantic consequences, which I experience all of those. So, for saying I disagree, I think there's a power in that. I think it also is kind of like that remixing, kind of like reversing, breaking klipas, like breaking patterns and preconditions. I also think that the people that said I disagree or I say no, I think I'm not just saying they gained a power, but I'm saying that it is an act of breaking sort of the old preconceptions where you're going to bow down to authority. I'm not saying be anti-authoritarian 100%. I'm not saying that. I'm a little more middle. I'm a little wilder, but I do think that middle pillar approach is the best. My honest opinion. Even if I have a hard time staying on it myself. And I usually am on it, and I'm honest about it. But it doesn't mean that I don't, draw from here, derive there. Yeah, we all know that's true too. But, the modern mage, the modern man, a modern woman, modern Dakini, that's what we have to do. And so psychic self-defense, I think, we had a space about that. I don't know if we talked about it like at length. But I do think that the Donald Michael Craig book is really good for his portion on psychic self-defense. Because he's taking sort of modern magic rituals, but like from that post World War II, exactly like what we're talking about, like OTO shit, but that's been remixed 50 times. Like, they pretend that. Well, I won't get into it, but all those rites, all the Golden Dawn shit, all the Astrum Argentum shit, all the OTO shit, that's been rewritten 50 or 60 times. Those are not pure rituals. They've been revised a million times. They have been purified, tested, tried, whatever you want to say. I'm not saying they work or don't work or they're better in their original form. I'm just saying that the reality is they have been played with a lot. So I think that it's okay for us to also think conceptually, not necessarily to do, but conceptually. This is why it's a cool book. Because it can be approached in this more chaos magic, much more Temple of Psychic Youth kind of way. And it was interesting because the Temple of Set guy, he admitted there was a huge beef between Temple of Set people and Temple of Psychic Youth people. Now, why would that be? Why would these two weird factions of people that I don't even agree with either of them, why would there be a huge beef? And what would it be about? And it's fundamentally, they were doing this exact same thing. That's the funniest part about it. Aquino was married to who? Lovecraft. And Temple of Psychic Youth was into like punk and like kind of like a neo-expressionism and like this kind of weird, it was like proto sort of identitarianism, and I don't mean it in the white identitarian sense, I mean it in the rainbow, whatever that is, identitarian sense, in that, they were much more into like self-expression, like creating your own narratives, and they talked about this. They talked very explicitly about this, creating like your own mythos, your own narrative, your own lore, your own legend, your own histories. And it's not necessarily that you're lying, it's that you're taking things that are true, but then you're also remixing them. So they're fundamentally, we're talking about the same things, and maybe that's what they didn't like about each other, is that they didn't like that they could call bullshit on each other. But I will say, in defense of Temple of Psychic Youth, I do think that the chaos magic approach is, in my opinion, better. Simply because it's much more reliant on your own mind, which isn't necessarily the only thing in the reality, but it's a fundamental, component of it. So I think it's a useful tool. At least you can just think of chaos magic as a tool rather than a complete ontological system. Just think of it as a tool. It's just able to think of things conceptually, not hold on to things, never be fixed in your view, be able to be flexible, dancing, right? Yesodic, but you're not the star of the Leela. You're empty. You're trying to go higher. You're trying to rectify. You're also doing what you need to do along the way. So you're non-dual. So I think chaos magic offers all of that. Sometimes I think the imagery gets way too weird, way too like abyssal. I'm sure that that's useful in the same way that the carnal ground in Tantra is very useful and the ferocious deities are very useful. But I also think that if you start with no meaning, no substance, and then you sort of like apply like tacky glue meaning and like glitter to things, they have no substance ultimately. So it's not going to have potency. It's it's aborted with potential. There's no potential left. And I use that word specifically because that is what that kind of is. Kind of like you've kind of created a magical working entity, and you've kind of like let it go halfway. Yes, Solar, please go ahead.
I don't know if this is a hard and fast rule and like, conservation of energy kind of thing, but it's like at that point you're burning mental, conscious, awareness, magical resources to try to like juice up what are ultimately just like energetic like pylons or boosters that are trying to get you where you need to go. So at that point, like why not just direct all of that effort straight down at the ground and try to blast off directly? You know what I mean? Like it's hard for me to imagine a situation where you're trying to like zhuzh up these supplemental sources of meaning and empowerment and things like that in a way that you're actually coming out net positive for going through that redirection. You know what I mean? Because at that point you're entirely conscious of exactly what you're doing, right? And so I don't know. It just for me that seems inefficient. I don't know. I'm open to being proven wrong in practice, but
I think this is one of your best qualities, is that you look for efficiency. I also appreciate like a pragmatic approach. Obviously, magic should be nothing if not pragmatic, because what's the point of doing it otherwise? So, no, I agree. I totally agree. I think is a great way to frame it. And you can see a lot of people got lost in the weeds, like Order of Trapezoids. They got lost in the angles. It's just like, there's many dead ends, and it's not saying that it's a dead end system. I don't think it is. I just think that there was a weakness in some of the mythologies, and I think that is like it's the fundamental flaw of everything, isn't it? It's like the story, the Leela around it. Is it correct? Does it have truth? Because if it doesn't, it just does not. It's not equipped to be aggregated. Yes, Joshua, please go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, since you mentioned the angles, I thought this would be a good time to interject with a question or comment that I had. So I was shout out to Zaralath. I was listening to him and Gabe Slick Dissident the other day, and he was talking about how Heimdall who could see everything, had sacrificed his ear at the well. The same well Odin sacrificed his right eye, Heimdall sacrificed his ear to gain sight, whereas Odin gained knowledge. And I thought that was so strange. And I thought, well, were they both the right? And I thought Solar might know. And if so, I thought, well, how interesting. Because, you know, just in relationship to where the right eye and ear are, they are kind of close together. And that maybe that's part of the right hand path where Chokma is, that emanation. And you just mentioned earlier that you thought that's where Odin would be. I thought that was really funny. And I was like, man, maybe that's where the well is, right? That they're put sacrifice. That's the well of sacrifice for all intents and purposes, I guess. And it's interesting because when you're in the Masonic Lodge, you have to divest yourself of everything, and you have to actually give up a token, but you don't have anything because you've been divested. So that's why you get invested with your tokens and such, right? So there's a pass required to pass beyond that to Keter, because that's like you have to leave like your body behind or whatever, because that's the realm of God, right? And so I think that's really profound, and I wonder if that's perhaps also related to when Odin hangs from the tree. I was wanting to ask Solar, how many nights was that? I think it was 9 maybe, but there's a poem that goes along with it, and it's called like the windswept tree, and he's hanging from it with a spear in his side, and he gets the logos or the word, but it's a slightly different number than Hebrew, but I think it's similar. And then also there's the story of Odin, or not Odin, but Thor rather, who is fighting basically Vitra or Hjormonger, the serpent, world serpent, and he's bitten, and after being bitten he makes 9 steps and dies. So I just was curious if there's any relationship to all those things, because I recently learned about the Arabic numerals and how each numeral 1, 2, 3, 4 up through 9 is actually a measure of the number of angles mapped on the Cartesian plane to create the numeral. And I was just thinking about the 9 in general is 9 angles. And so I was wondering if that had a relationship to all this, because 9 usually has like this death element or sacrifice or something like that to it. So anyway, I just wanted to make those comments and ask kind of that question in a weird way. I don't even know how to phrase the question, but does all that make sense, or can you expand on any of that?
Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I only have like a couple little scattered thoughts, right? Sorry, should have asked this 2 hours ago when I was a little sharper. Yeah, so he hangs for 9 nights, right? So it's interesting. I need to go back and read the story because I actually thought he sacrificed the ear for hearing, right? Now you say sight, which kind of like complicates it a little bit. But what I was going to say, for me anyway, and this kind of ties into, again, I hate to talk about a podcast episode that no one actually besides Jin has heard because it hasn't come out yet. But anyway, an interesting point of connection between the sacrifice of the ear and the sacrifice of the eye for me into the well is the way that it sort of deconstructs in different ways, or actually multiple ways in the case of Odin, spatiality, right? So we have 2 ears and 2 eyes, and that gives us the ability to perceive depth and hear in stereo, right? And also, even though we hear in stereo, but we're sort of like unified around the point or perspective embodied in space of like our bodies, right? And so by sacrificing an ear or an eye, you're simultaneously sort of destroying the spatialization of that sense, but then you're also destroying the spatiality of the physical embodied individual, right? Because you're both seeing with the one remaining eye or hearing with the one remaining ear that's in your head, right? But you're simultaneously now co-located somewhere else as well, right? Like you're still seeing through the eye that's in the well, etc., right? And to me, that's pointing at essentially some kind of like non-dualism, right? You're neither here nor there, right? It's transcending the sort of like limitation of like a rigid perspectival way of making sense of the world. That's like how I generalize it. And for me, that connects with both of them. But again, full disclosure, I'm gonna have to go back and reread that because I'm perhaps like mixing up some of the details that you're kind of, correcting on. So yeah, like I'm not the expert here.
I could have been even erroneous in thinking that it was for sight. Maybe it was for hearing. I just know that he guards. Doesn't he guard the Bifrost Bridge, like the bridge to Asgard, from Midgard to Asgard? Like he's the gatekeeper. And so I couldn't remember if he stands on guard listening or being able to see everything. So maybe was Odin then able to see everything, and that's like he could see visions of prophecy, because he was basically trying to stop Ragnarok, right?
Yeah, the
Or
way I always understood it is because it's the well of prophecy, so it's sort of it's not you're not seeing things that are even 100% going to happen, but I always understood it as like kind of understanding the consequences. We could say like the karmic mechanics if you want to kind of blend systems, but what inputs were going to lead to what outputs in this kind of structural hypothetical way. Again, I always go back to that passage from Dune, standing over and seeing the sea of possibilities and trying to chart out the one future that doesn't lead to disaster, right? Like I imagine Odin when he first sees into the well for the first time. So that's what he was looking for, and that's what he was trying to do. So now he sees kind of with the full sort of like karmic cosmological implications of what his actions are going to be.
That's perfect, dude, because he does lose his sight. Moadib does. So it's later on, though. I don't know if the movies ever get around to that, but there was a mini series on Sci-Fi Channel that did, actually, but it was like Children of Dune, basically. But yeah, man, he loses his sight and starts seeing with like the spiritual vision. So he lost both his eyes in that case. So in this example we're using with Odin, we're saying like he loses one eye, so he's like seeing into the spirit realm with one eye about the future and stuff, right? And tapping into the logos, because his reception of the logos, the runes, that's actually a separate ritual, right? Because now, was that too at the well of knowledge, or was that where he went somewhere else? Because it's like he hangs from a tree and stares at like a pond or water or something like that.
Yeah, this all happens very tersely in the actual source material. It's like bam, 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 you win.
Yeah.
Matt, if you want to go, please go. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt the boys.
Oh, good. Just something very interesting. You guys were talking about Odin. One thing to notice, if I'm not mistaken, he loses the right eye, right? And if that's the case, then think about it. The right eye is connected to the left brain. So he loses, or basically he sacrifices his material vision, his logic vision, to be able to see like you were saying, the spiritual one, the digital one, right? So he stops seeing with the logic and just gives birth to the right side brain. And I think in the Egyptian story, there's someone similar. I don't know if it's Horus, but there's something similar as well, like this idea of changing an eye or losing an eye for something else. And you have in a bunch of animes as well. It's very interesting. I always bring up the guy from Senseiya. I always forget his name. Whatever, the Buddhist guy, and he does this, like he sacrifices, quote unquote. So there's two guys. There's Shiryu, which is always blind, right? He's always blind himself to get the stuff done, and there's the Buddhist guy, which just closes his eyes, so he never opens them, so he can get the spiritual vision. It's very interesting. Also in the Matrix, you have that concept, right? Neo I think it's the first one already. He loses the vision, but then he starts seeing all the code, even outside of the Matrix. He starts seeing with the spiritual vision. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah, I don't want to go on about it, but if anybody plays Elden Ring, all the faith-based characters are all blindfolded or blind, and so that they can see the spirit world and follow the guidance that's being laid before them. So it's interesting that that's becoming so prevalent, this concept in our society today. It's like the real world that you see, the world you see around you actually isn't real. It's Maya, it's illusion. It's kind of like reminding us of that matrix, that the programming, the logos, how the words are used to like create everything. It's part of the, what is it? They call it revelation of the method, or something like that. But I wanted to mention one thing that came to mind, because we're talking about Odin staring down at water, or I was rather, and then it reminded me of the Mayans who they practiced astrology by staring into pools of water so that they could see the starry sky above, which for me is the logos. It's all the letters are up there. And then, but they would also have pools of mercury down below, and I can't remember why. But anyway, a lot of people associate Mercury with Odin as well. So I thought that was kind of a strange, oblique parallel. I didn't never drew any parallels to like the Americas like that. But anyway.
Solar, please go ahead.
Yeah, really quick. I just wanted to, I'm not. I don't want to be like Odin Stan here, but I just want to point out that to me, the distinction between giving up one of the two eyes, or in the case of Heimdall, ears, and giving up both is significant. Jin talks a lot about various traditions being two sort of world denying, life denying, etc. Right? And so I think there is something to be said for the tradition of the sort of like partial sacrifice for a greater and like wider frame of reference, a wider view, while not sacrificing everything and sort of implicitly turning away. Now, again, I know that in those other stories, narratives, traditions, whatever, they are granted a sort of higher sight or a superior sight. But anyway, I just like sort of, within, kind of the scope of this discussion, I think there's a certain balance, right? That the sort of mundane material sight is brought into synthesis with this sort of liberated non-dual view, right? It's the whole package. It's not this transactional, all of this for all of that. That's all.
Dude, you reminded me of another one. Tyr. He loses a hand to Fenrir. So there is this pattern. It looks like Balder is actually killed outright, but with a twig of mistletoe, which the high druids would. Somebody mentioned the last druid or something earlier, right? Anyway, they would use a golden scythe to cut the mistletoe, and they couldn't let it touch the ground, right? And I think they harvest that from oaks. So big relationship there with the Donar oak and Thor and lightning and all that. But yeah.
Oh, thank you, Joshua. So I want to just add in a little bit of that. I know Joshua, you crested Solar, and I think Solar did a great answer. I guess my one little bit that I've never really discussed is that sometimes in Tantra, in a secret layer, so at a third layer at least, the right eye is actually the sun or Ketu. And it can also be the left eye is Rahu or the moon. So I think that if you understand what I talk about Chokmah and the widow Dumavati who appears there, who only taketh, she never giveth, I think there's something interesting. But I also think it's important to note, like, who else arises at Chokmah? It's where Vishnu is. Vishnu is sleeping on the supernal, the black inky waters. He's sleeping on his 9-tiered serpent. Well, Ketu's terminus is also at Dumavati. And if you agree with my attribution that it's Neptune, Ketu, Chokmah, at least 3 densities, right? 3 names at that Sephira. I think that, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it makes sense I think my argument makes sense. Is like he arises there. It's like an ineffable expression. There's a non-dual wisdom. Yeah, 100% it's non-dual, but it's also smoky. It's also opaque. It's opaline. Something unlucky about it. Jayesta. I know Ram is interested in that goddess, but she is kind of considered the anti Lakshmi, the anti-wealth giver, goddess of poverty. Dumavati is not really that. That's kind of a modern Indian conception. She is a widow, though. She has nothing. And she has walked away from, even, as I tweeted the other day, she has walked away from even the Smashana itself, because that transgressive, that antinomian things, that's all, she's already done all that. It's already old knowledge. She's looking for new knowledge. She's thirsty. That's why she swallows all the water around her. That's why only smoke exists. It's interstitial, right? Sort of vacuity space, as they would say in Buddhism. It's emptiness in its totality, but it has a desire, which is, yeah, she's looking for, she's looking for knowledge. She's looking for Shiva. She's looking for her primordial consort. And because he is the ultimate sort of expression, he is what that is. He is secret knowledge. But he doesn't arise there. But a little boy riding a black dog does arise there. And I see you, Joshua, so I'll wrap it up. But backtook by Rava in a tantric way, he would be the companion. So she would actually produce two. She would produce a son who would be Uchista Ganapati, so the left-hand path of Ganapati, the outcast of the elephant god, and then a little boy who is really Mahakala, or the Time King, or Batuk Bhairava, who's a little boy riding a black dog. But he doesn't always have to ride a black dog. This is more of an iconographical choice, as I've talked about. Sometimes it's a bear, sometimes it's a boar. Depends on the culture, depends on the region. Tended to shift. And so, but that's Shiva, right? That's not Shiva, okay? But it's maybe like an expression of him in the world. So, but I would posit, and just this is just my theory, so you can totally say it's wrong and Jin's wrong and he's prejudiced, okay? But in my opinion, I think that Odin is more of an expression of Vishnu. It makes sense, right? He's like both a greater and a lesser hero at times. He does both, sort of like transgressive and like pro cosmic things. And he's obsessed with knowledge, and that, it was my last point, was that it's not just knowledge, it's the words, right? It's the runes, the runa, it's the flowers. Well, that appears at Hode. That's what Hode really is. It's the sparks of splendor. It's the flowers. In Tantra, we would even place the well, or what you guys call the well, we would even place that at Hode. Sri Vijja, the Sri Yantra, the 64 triangles. And who is there? Tripura Sundari, Kura Kula, Bala Tripura Sundari. It's the mother of the three worlds, she who is so beautiful at the three worlds. But that's the thing about the goddess, she's empty, right? The Shakti's always empty. So she's not fully there, but you have to account also for her. So that's why I say he's more related to Vishnu, because Shiva's not really interested. They're both sort of the world creating deities. He's interested in as much as that is part of him. He loves her, but he doesn't really want to be in the material world. She loves the material world. And Vishnu, in a way, in a metaphorical way, so this is not really true in the Puranas at all, but it seems to be true in some of the other texts, is that I would say that his character, or maybe his archetype, you could say, his Ahrimanic archetype, actually, you could say in a metaphorical sense that he's obsessed with her. But that's not how the Puranas describe it. He's more interested in the play that she produces, the light that she produces, the sort of like stories that she tells. And that's why she gives him the word, because she was also given the word. So you have to think, we're going into this 4-5 turning. I'm calling it 4-5 because it's like a conjunction between the two in a way. Obviously, Hesed and Gevra, all things, obviously, fire and water are always in synthesis. But to bring up something that Joshua said, and then I'm going to let Joshua have the last word, is Yesod, that 9. All things are rectified in Yesod. All things are rectified in the foundation. How did you build the foundation? If you built a shitty foundation, hired a bunch of third worlders to build your foundation, yeah, it didn't work out. But if you build it properly, you build it with care, you build it with attention, yeah, you can transform the world. And the Crystal Kingdom, I'm using that Sailor Moon metaphor to meet Matt's Saint Seiya, which I also like, metaphor. But it appears before you because it's already there. God gave you that knowledge. If you want to say it's from God, that's fine. If you want to say it's from higher sources, if you want to say it's from Buddha, if you want to say it's from outside the cube, that's fine too. But yeah, it'll appear before you, and doesn't mean make your life perfect. Doesn't mean you get what you want, but it means that you have now the tools. So that's why Yesod is so important. Whether you want to be at Yesodic consciousness or not, I know we've discussed that. There's benefit and negative, just like with all of them. So you have to treat them like with love, right? That's kind of the point. You have to treat each sufferer with love, regardless of your aversion of them or not. Regardless if they, to bring up something Solar said, if you fear them, do you fear what you perceive when you're walking through the density? Or do you say, no, that's bullshit? That's archonic bullshit that I've made up with my own mind. And but as long as you can say that, then you're no longer scared of it, right? Kind of let it go. Okay, Matt, please go ahead.
Just something really quick on Yesod, where if you're going down the tree, so you're trying to bring an idea into reality, right, from Kether to Malkut, Yesod is the last step before it's actually manifested. And if you think about it, you need the foundation. Let's say on a personal level, I want a new job or whatever it is, right? If I don't have the foundation on myself for this new job, it just won't come up. Literally. Like I need to feel like I'm worthy of it. Otherwise, it's not going to come. Never. So you can do as many affirmations, visualizations, however many techniques you want to do. If you don't feel like you're worthy, meaning you don't have the foundation, it will never come. So like that, if you're trying to bring ideas into reality, that's like literally the block where a lot of people, they go through all the sephiroths, they come there, and it's like, because of a lot of paradigms, just don't feel like they're worthy of it, and goes back to energy war. Doesn't never comes. So it's a very very important sephiroth, as well as when you're trying to go up, right? So if you're down here, you want to go up, it's the first thing you're going to encounter. Like you can even say, when you don't work it, like one of its clifas, it's being lazy. So again, if you want to build something but you're lazy, you cannot build a foundation for it. It will never come. It will never come back to the source. So it's very very um, important. Let's say Sephiroth. Not that the other ones are important. It's just that this one specifically seems to get a lot of trouble.
It is interesting, isn't it, that both of like the Tibereth and Yesod seem to give us so much trouble, but they are actually very easy. They seem very easy when you're just reading it. When you're just reading the conceptual ideas, all the sages agree. Oh, these are no problem. But that's not true. They're actually some of the more difficult ones, to be honest. So I think that's interesting also relating to the eye. I know, Joshua, I didn't let you come up. Please come up now, if you're ready. But I'm sorry. But I do think it relates to the idea of the eye as well. This like kind of Yesodic and Tipperatic rectification and the eclipse. Because what is the eclipse but kind of an apocalypse and a revelation at the same time? Interesting. Okay, Joshua, please go ahead.
An eclipse is also perpetual equinox, so to speak, because it does take on an eerie kind of vibe. Like you get the shadow serpents coming through. All the shadows are cast really strange, and that would be what I would call the gray. Anyway, that didn't mean to rhyme, by the way. Anyhow, so I wanted to mention a couple things. And so maybe when Odin hangs from the tree to gather the Logos, he then gets understanding of what he gathered from the well of wisdom. Because I'd imagine just drinking straight from the well, you probably would get kind of mad seeing everything all at once, right? And then the weird, gives structure to it. It is the matrix itself. In Hebrew, it would be the three letters Mem, Shen, and Aleph, right? And those are the progenitors in Hebrew. So I don't know what they would be analogous to in Runa, or weird, but probably analogous to the three Norns, because I think they take Odin's eye and share it among them, and they are like there's like the Nords and I can't remember what the other one is. There's two different ones. There's ones that we fate, and then there's the three witches around the cauldron. But anyway, or the well. And I think they might even share Heimdall's ear and Tyr's hand, perhaps. I don't know. But I know that they do share Odin's eye, I think. So I thought that was profound because of what that could represent, them being sightless. And the sightless thing kept coming up. I appreciated that. So King David referred to himself, I am a worm. A blind worm is truly living on God's grace and mercy. It's being given everything it needs to live, yet it's blind. And so its only goal in life is to just complete its life cycle, whatever that might be, right? And so I think approaching it that way too is maybe a way to get good results, because it reminds me of when Odin's riding his chariot, you never want to be higher than his wheels, because he's got spokes on it that are meant to like cut you down at the shin or whatever. So you got to lay really low when he comes by, right? That's kind of how it goes, I guess. And by having that lowly, I am a worm, worms they have nothing to fear from Odin in that sense, right? No Gavura, no fury will come upon them, for they have prostrated themselves, right, as a worm. So I think that way we kind of receive blessings too, if we're humble enough, and we're less likely to get the blowback if we're not deserving, maybe. But anyway, I just wanted to speculate as well about the weird in general, because it's typically said that the female did not need the logos to access the Siddhi, which is like the magic, whereas Odin, because he was male, had to gain access to the Siddhi through the runes, or the runa. And so there's like this relationship of sorts kind of going on there, where it's almost monastic in a sense. I mean, maybe he only had Freya for the singular purpose of having children, right? And really he was married to whatever it was he was doing, you know. But anyway, he sacrificed himself to himself also on the tree, which I think is strange. So it's got a very Aries kind of vibe to it in a weird way, no pun intended. And so I would wonder too, like in chronologically speaking, did he sacrifice his eye prior to hanging from the tree, or which came first? So I was just wondering, because if he did the eye thing prior, it would make sense to do the tree thing afterwards to try and gain insight. And I see that tree he's hanging from as being like the Separat, or perhaps in some ways the Klipa. But again, with the rope hanging, there again is that, I can't remember the word you used, but the trap or whatever, the snare. And that's the Hanged Man tarot card as well. So I know I kind of stream of consciousness when I talk, but anyway, those were some of the last things I wanted to mention. Oh, and Atum from Egyptian, there was the left and right eyes. The left eye of wisdom, I think, was what Atum relied upon first to deal with Apep, the serpent. So with wisdom, he could predict the movements of the serpent. He could dodge it. He could not ever be hit. He could hide. He could evade. And so at one point he has Tefnut and I can't remember the other child, and they're in the void somewhere. And so he sends his eye out to go get them or something, I think. And while the eye's gone, he becomes vulnerable to Apep. And that time, I can't remember how the origin is, but the right eye of dynamicism, of strength, is then he manifests it, and that's like the right eye, I guess. And so then he doesn't even have to run from the serpent. He stands toe to toe with it and can subdue it. And so when Sophia, or wisdom, the other eye, returns with the children, finds him not needing her or whatever, right? And so like runs off. And so then Thoth he creates Thoth afterwards and sends him afterwards. And Thoth's the stenographer, right? The Logos dude. So I think that female and Logos thing is sort of even there a little bit, where he's seeking after her, but he's transcribing the story or whatever wisdom she gives him. I don't know. But I find that somewhat analogous as well, that Autumn can't access her, without some intermediary. And it kind of has Mercury vibes there again, like kind of with Odin, being like carrying the word and all. Anyways, my schizo rant's done.
No, I appreciate that, Joshua. I'll add something, is that I do think that there's a mercurial element. You're right. I think that, but there's an idea in Ramic that, all the rectification happens at Yesod. So you're really just, Mercury, that's great. Like, all the Geberatic fire, the Hasidic waters, the luminosity of Netzach, like all that. Yeah, it's all great, beautiful, great. It's like what Matt said. It's like if you don't have the foundation prepared to sort of like contain it in a skull cup, as I would say, the higher knowledge, it can't really go anywhere. Can't really do anything with it. It's massless. It doesn't have potential at that point, if you can't contain it, at least. So what I mean by that is that in the pranas, Shiva is really he's the prime speaker. Everything that he says is reality. Everything he thinks is reality. Everything he feels is reality. There is no separation. He's completely non-dual. He undergoes a narrative apotheosis into non-duality, but he's best understood in the Advaita context. Okay. Vishnu is dualistic because he actually engages with the play. I'm not saying Odin's dualistic. I'm saying he's not the progenitor of the word. So it would make sense for him to be more closely related to Vishnu, who is he's neither the progenitor of the word. That's not bad. In the form of Hayagriva, so not the Buddhist Hayagriva, but the Puranic and a little bit of the Vedic Hayagriva, that can be understood as a form of Vishnu. He takes, and what does he do? He gives of the texts, the Upanishads in particular, he gives them to man because he wants them to know the story. So in just even a Puranic way, I'm calling it Pranas, but it covers it's a little broader than Puranic, but just bear with me. It's late, and this is an informal space. So he does give it to them. He does giveth to them. He does he tries to engage with the word as the best he can. So this does again remind me of Vishnu. That's not a bad thing. It makes a lot of sense, right? We've seen a lot of people are into Christ consciousness. A lot of people are into Krishna consciousness. What are we going to do? Everybody has their preferences. We talked about this last time. But then the Egyptian story really makes sense to the Pranas. Now, I think that there is a deep connection between the Puranic and the Egyptian stories. It seems like there is a deep connection between the Isis and Osiris, the Shiva and the Shakti, the Uma and the Tara, whoever you want to. I call Uma Tara. We'll call her Uma Tara. So the Queen of Heaven, obviously, but she's not because of Tantra. But although the Puranas weren't necessarily written, they were actually written before the Tantras in one way of thinking. But she's much more herself. She's much more full as a character. She doesn't run away. She embraces her own bullshit in a way because she creates it all through her illusion, through her Maya, right? She is Maya, Mahamaya. So she kind of embraces her own bullshit and decides to rectify it through her own means. So this does seem like an innovation in terms of the story. Like there's always a way that they propel the story forward. But anyways, about the Toth figure, that this makes a lot of sense in relation to Ganapati. If you understand the story of Ganapati, who is Shiva's son, he severs Ganapati's head. Ganapati's a little earthen man made of turmeric, semen, starfire, mercury, liquid mercury, which is called parad, and some other ingredients, sandalwood powder, milk, all these things. Okay. Shakti makes him to guard her bathing room. Now, this does have actually a tantric meaning. I'm not going to explain it right now. We can get into it later. But basically, it is her going off to the 8 Mahasmashanas, the 8 great carnal grounds of the world, which are all, interestingly enough, they are either on the ocean or they are associated with water. So some of them are depicted as or described as an oasis, or they are described as a mangrove or on the beach. There's different ones. So any of the 8 great cardinal grounds. But anyways, so in the Puranic story, they just describe it as she's going off to her bathing chamber, because in every story where the Dakinis enter the Mahasmashana, they are always depicted as going to bathe. Now, this also has it's very baptismal. We can get into this in another space, okay? But she creates this little boy to guard her gate, guard her threshold, right? This little earthen man, little gnome, maybe dwarf, little Yaksha king. Shiva comes along. He had just slayed the Asura of the 4 directions, this white elephant headed deity. He has severed it, as Shiva often does. He's carrying the head with him in some ideas. And so he meets this little dwarven boy, and this little dwarven boy says, I am the protector of the great mother. She is my mother, and you shall not pass. And as he is kind of like the king of obstacles, Shiva cannot pass. So they have a battle of contests, a battle of wills, we'll say. And Shiva ends up using his Trishul to decapitate his son. So he uses his trident to decapitate his son. And then Shakti comes out of the bathing chamber. Now, this also has a tantric meaning. And she kind of says, well, you just killed your son. So good job. I hate you. Fix it right now. And in many ways, Shiva is subservient, and this is also accounted for in the rise and popularity of Shakta Tantra. So maybe not Shakta as a theology, as a stream of mainstream Hinduism, but Shakta Tantra is by far the most popular of all the tantric sort of schools in India, whether it's Kali Kola or Srivijaya. So he's a little cuck to her. He's definitely a little scared of her. I mean, she is the co-creatrix of the whole world, so I'd be a little scared too. And so he fixes it by placing the Asuras, the white elephant head, he places it on the body of his son. And it is his son, it just didn't happen in sex. She preserved some of his nectar, and she used it when it was when she wanted a little child. So there is something a little weird and sperm bank about that, but I digress. Okay, so we are going to close it up. Obviously, these spaces don't happen without anyone in the room. Our last space got like 500 listens. I almost like fell off my, honestly, like I was shocked because we only had it only shows me like a dozen people. It doesn't show me like 100 people. So I'm not seeing like where all these people are coming from. And but I'm glad that people are liking the spaces. I'm really happy to be doing them. As I said, it doesn't happen without you guys, but I also grow. I've grown a lot. Maybe I'm a little wild still, but I think I've grown a lot as a person and a magician. And it's only, even with podcasting, the best times it happens is in synthesis, is in discourse, is in conceptual thinking. Like everything that we do, everything we talk about, metafiction, meta reality, and metapolitics, metamagic, all of it, meta theology. That is kind of what we're doing, because we're kind of not being syncretic. We're kind of saying, there's interesting parallels here. Yeah, everybody has cultural preferences. Everybody has Sephardic preferences, Clipolithic preferences. So, but there's a map. There's a map here, and we're all kind of piecing it together. So, anyways, so that being said, it's very late for Matt, so I appreciate Matt, especially for co-hosting with me. Thank you so much, Matt. Everybody, check out and follow Matt. He is quickly becoming a very good Kabbalah master himself as a very young millennial or Zoomer boy, or is it Gen Alpha? I don't even know, but just really young, like a young gun. I'm an old.
TikToker, you can say.
So yeah, so appreciate that. Appreciate Solar. Solar is he is my co-host. Like, he is also a co-host, like the three of us on this space. I just want to point that out, although I didn't add him as co-host, but he is. And so we have John, we have Indiana Joe. Hello, Indiana Joe. I'm so glad you joined us. I don't know if you've joined us before, but we appreciate it. We love, when people engage. It's great for us. This is like, these are gonzo spaces. These are not meant for me to be Jin the Guru or anything. It's meant for me to work out my fucking weird ideas and see if they even have any viability. If they live or they die. Can the flower live without the corpus? Can it bloom in space? That's all it is. It's just magic. Of course, we have Avi, our Yogini queen, who stalwart member of the lodge, thick and thin from day one. Not many of you can say that. So, day one, true Naga. Okay, Joshua, the branch, my homie. Great dude, episode 39. Everybody go listen. Mr. Zachary Shumar, who is he's not really my unofficial co-host. He is kind of my co-host. Yeah, he's a co-host of Threshold Saints. He's been on so many episodes. We did Don Da Da. That was my personal favorite. I know that Zach was worried that he would seem like a weeb. I guess weebs aren't cool enough yet, but we're working on it. Monty and I are working on it. So I thought that was a great episode. Personally, I love Don Da Da. Didn't have much hope for modern anime, but I do love Don Da Da. And I love all of our Tracy Twyman series. That was an incredible, pivotal, axial moment for me as a podcaster. No, for real, like the Twyman stuff, that changed the whole trajectory of my thinking, of the way I approach material now, and of like, not even that I'm so enamored with her or even her work, but I think some of her ideas were incredibly interesting and definitely worth discussing. And I'm so happy that all of these other podcasters finally found their motherfucking balls, and they dropped or whatever had happened, and now they are doing their own time and stuff. So thank you, Zach, because that would never happen without the collabo. So, trailblazers and avant-garde groundbreakers. Okay, so Shakti, our Japanese yogini queen, we love you. Shakti is so kind, just the kindest person. We all love her so much, and she's so generous with her healing and the time that she takes to spend, in dialogue with many of you. I don't have a open DM like that. I try to not stay out of all of your DMs, to be honest, simply because I don't want to burden any of you with any of my bullshit. I really try not to bring that to your private ears most of the time. That's not 100% true. Solar's thinking, there's been a couple times, Jen, 100%, and I copped that. Okay, I totally copped that. I know I've had a dramatic couple months. I own it 100%. Promise I'm working it out. Been doing the Monlam, the king of aspiration prayers. It has really profoundly helped me. It's been really hard. It takes me about 40 minutes to do the full recitation in Tibetan, but it really has helped me. So thank you, HG25, because that is a traditional thing. When someone passes, you redo this 49-day recitation of the King of Aspiration prayers. And it's an incredible prayer. And it is a beginner's prayer, but it also it's perfect for intermediate person like me, who kind of goes a little off path, not intentionally necessarily, but because the world is complicated and confusing and made of colors, light, and sound. So that happens. So Shakti has also helped guide me in many ways, and she always appreciates and gives the best reacts to my Dharmic kind of, stream of consciousness that I subject the chat to. And so I appreciate that. Joseph Reed, thank you so much, brother, for coming to the space. We see you. We appreciate you. Appreciate all your engagement. Um, unofficial, official lodge member. So yeah, please come again if you liked it. Hopefully we did a good job. Rom, our other buddy. The thing is, Rom and Matt are not similar necessarily personality, but they're both hilarious, and they both give me a lot of shit, or they at least don't mind correcting me, but they'll also take my notes. That's what makes it kind of fun for me, because I give it right back, but I'm kind of like a little offended at first. And I'm like, okay, I actually think about that. That's actually makes sense. And yeah, it pushes me to be a little edgier. I think I'm pretty edgy in the sense that I hold myself back a lot. And I think that maybe I should embrace that like wild broccoli hair zoomer mentality. But I'm not quite there. I'm not ready to fully I'm still learning how to navigate the dragon. So let's see how I don't want to be totally out of control, especially in our public facing spaces. I think it's important that I have a modicum of sensibility and pragmatism. But no, points taken. I see where I've veered into the trad cath LARP in some ways. I've never really been that, but I can see where you can accidentally, fall into that scandalon or that trap. Mookie or Crow Dakini, we love you. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for making it through this entire space. And yeah, we think you're great. Love everything you share. Please continue. Lucifer, hello. Don't know you. That's okay. West Lee, sound cool. Interesting. Indigenous fellow. Yeah. We're all about that. We're all about the Hyperborean experience. um, Live Saturn, welcome. And thank you so much for coming. Okay, so that's room shoutouts. So good fucking job, Matt and Solar. So they get a special shout out because they were my co-hosts. And I'm Jin the fucking Ninja, Threshold Saints, the Grey Lodge, Friday night Gnostic Mass. So remember that. Our Friday meetings will always be Friday night Gnostic Mass. That's our new thing. I know I didn't really explain it to open, and so this was a perpetual equinox. And I also appreciate that William brought up that, or not William, Joshua brought up that idea that the perpetual equinox is like a perpetual eclipse, because that is true. And so I think that that's a really interesting way to end, especially in thinking of eyes. How Rahu is depicted in Buddhism as having 1,008 eyes all over his body. Each, the sort of, they can appear in two different ways. They can appear as opals in the gray smoke or the clouds, but they can also appear as green cat's eye in the darkness. So, very interesting. They also have a relationship to the sun and the moon. So, again, it all makes sense. It's all one big tree. Okay, so that being said, 10:36, that's a good time. I would have rather done 10:33, but I was being long-winded. That's okay. Sometimes you just flow with it. That's magic too. Have a great night, everybody, and stay safe. Psychic self-defense. Okay, good night, guys.